So how you been, Damon?
Uh, well, we just got back from Paris actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, little little birthday trip. Um,
For yourself or
yeah, just with myself and Kate. Um, Children are all grown up now, so they're all doing other things. So this is about my fourth trip to Paris, I think overall.
oh wow.
Yeah, I've got quite a story to tell about Paris actually. But a lot of my favorite poets are there. Apollinaire.
Yeah.
Rombo hanging around. They're all there in the Latin Quarter, getting up to their mischief.
Yeah, I've never been to
Yeah,
Paris,
yeah.
but
It's a very important place for poets, I
yeah.
think.
I
Yeah,
think for Western art, period. Like just the entire like yeah, Paris, Vienna, yeah, these great old European cities like that yeah. I mean, yeah, you could go all the way back if we want Rome, these kind of just incredible.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there
Go.
any chance? Is there any chance you could go one day? Do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to. And my wife would love to. Yeah, so we definitely would love to do that at some point.
Yeah,
You know, we'll s-
there are a few Americans around.
yeah, yeah. And it's not even that so much, yeah, I mean, I'll do the tourist thing. Like I'm fine with the people are always like, "Oh, I don't want to do the tourist thing." I love the tourist thing. So that's fine with me, getting on the bus or whatever with like a bunch of Filipinos and yeah, like
Yeah, you got to
yeah.
you've got to do the tourist things. I mean,
Yeah.
the kind of center of Paris is very, very big. It could take a lot of people, not like central London, which is much sort of tighter. So, you've got the Tuileries, you've got the Place de Concorde, you've got this whole sort of area of the Notre Dame and then the Louvre. It's all laid out on a, a huge scale. It could take thousands of people, which is just as well because there are thousands of people.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
any good writing or anything? Any good inspiration you got by walking the streets of Paris?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Rue de
I've been
Paris.
working. Yeah, yeah. Rue de Paris. Well, we're on the Rue de Saint Paul actually, which is very close to the Seine. So you put your head out the window and um and you can see the Seine actually flowing along on one end of the river, and then you put your head out onto the other. You turn in the other direction. You got one of those beautiful big boulevards. But it's yeah, I'm sort of working up a poem. I'm a bit of a fan of Zone by Apollinaire, which starts off with him from the symbolist perspective, I think, envisioning the Eiffel Tower as a shepherd, shepherding all of the bridges along the Seine. And it ends with this line, the son, a severed neck, which puzzled me for a while. And then, of course, I realized that it's quite a French thing, really. Sort of Madame Guillotine and everything. But I mean, if you think of a severed neck, of course, it's all bloody and red and circular. Of course, that's the sun sort of setting. Um, that's the sun setting over the Seine. And as we were walking back on our last day, we were sort of going towards the metro. I passed this window of a shop on the Rue Saint Paul, and it had all these little collars. You know how men used to wear these sort of paper collars with
Yeah,
studs, and they used to wear neckties over these paper collars, and they used to change the collars every day.
right.
And some of the collars were linen covered, and some of them were just sort of polished and waxed into a very hard and starched into a very hard sort of shape with little wing tuck over where you put the necktie.
Right.
And I was looking at these collars, and suddenly I thought, they're tiny. They're really, really small. They're not like they're not like, male necks today, which are like twice the size. These tiny little
Right.
collars. And I thought, one of those could have been worn by Verlaine, or you know, uh, and any of those great writers, and then I started thinking about necks, and
Yeah.
then I thought about Zone, and I thought, I think this poem I'm writing, it could end. It could end with all these little sort of
Yeah.
coders, with all these sort of absent writers, these braver souls.
Heavy,
Bored.
heavy,
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No! Dinner,
resources,
life, friends is boring. We must not say so.
That's fantastic. Yeah. It's always interesting with this class. I don't know exactly when we transitioned from that, but my hobbyist from men's, menswear in general, my hobby of things was I just know about, yeah, before laundry, before you had dry cleaners, before you had in-unit laundry, washing machines, et cetera, you couldn't launder your shirts, so they would change the collar on the shirt,
Yeah,
almost like yeah, it's so old. I mean, it was before I was, and nobody was doing this. But I think even by the time my father was born, or nobody was doing that. My father's in his 70s. Like it's not.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, that's always interesting. Yeah, those little things. Especially things that you don't see anymore. Like yeah, collar pins. Occasionally, you'll see somebody who's really into kind of menswear and stuff like that. The collar pin, they used to exist to literally pin the collar to the shirt, but now they kind of exist to hold the tie in place, like across
yes, that's right. Yeah,
keep the lapels pinned
yeah,
down and stuff. It's
yeah. And there's quite an American thing going on with the vintage clothes shops as well.
oh, okay.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I think there's a small chain of them, drifting, or around the streets around the center. Those are great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
really cool. Well,
yeah.
here we are, Damon. Again, let's get started. We have, again, welcome to another episode of Heavy Board, listeners. We are back with friend of the pod, Damon Moore. Damon, welcome back to Heavy Board.
Thanks, Andrew.
Of course. And today, Damon, I wanted to ask you about this because today's the day. This is what I was thinking of as I was preparing for this. I was like, today's the day we're going into Louise Glück. We're continuing our conversation on this Louise Glück, all of her books, pretty much at this point.
Yeah,
We're going into her third book today, Descending Figure from 1980.
yeah,
And obviously, we've already done this. People that have been listening to this, you have to subscribe to hear the whole series, listeners. But still, if you've just listened to the free episodes, you know our history with Glick and Damon's history with Glick and how we're both big fans and we wanted to do this. But I wanted to ask you, Damon, because this is a book. This has been a book that's been like towering over this project. Even you brought it
yeah.
up every time. You've kind of been like hesitant, even like I was like, what is it about
Sure,
Descending Figure with?
sure,
We'll just start
sure,
there. Yeah, yeah. What is it about
sure.
Descending Figure that was drawing you in, making you horrified, loved, nervous, whatever, all the feelings, right? All the things that you get out of poetry, you're getting it out of this
Yes,
book. What is it?
yeah. I don't know if it's drawing me in, Andrew. I think it's drawing me away. There's just so much coming into this collection. It's To me, it's one of the pinnacles of her career, and it's a vortex of all of these different themes. And suddenly, you're in the middle of the space, and all of these things suddenly start arriving, and you think, well, where's that from? And where's that from? And where's that from? And they're sort of popping up everywhere. And it's quite scary because the language, the diction can be still quite brutal and abrupt, which we saw in Firstborn. It hasn't ameliorated much. Her
Yeah.
form, her form has really come together. I mean, it really structurally, it's that form that she found. I would say she found it in the school children,
Yeah.
Um, I was kind of looking at that poem again, and I realized actually, it's very, very cleverly put together. It's only four stanzas, isn't it? And the first stanza, it's got, and all morning the mothers have labored to gather the late apples red and gold. And then in the in the in the third stanza, how orderly are the nails on which the children hang their overcoats of blue or yellow wool. And I realize there's a sort of she's bringing the imagery. She's really tightening the imagery there, isn't she? She's crossing the river Styx with sort of colours, and grey is also a colour where she sort of ends with the grey limbs of the fruit trees. And I suddenly thought, "Ooh, that's very tight in terms of imagery." And then I suddenly thought, is she a symbolist? Is there a symbolist tradition going on there? That's when I started looking to symbolism, and I rang up the Shakespeare bookshop in uh, in uh, in Paris to try and get a copy of Axel's Castle, which is kind of one of the seminal works on poetry, on symbolist poetry written by Edmund Wilson. It was published in 1942, but I think originally it was something like 1937 or something, published in America. It's quite difficult to get hold of. And they said, "Oh no, we haven't got one, but try the San Francisco bookshop around the corner." So I rang up the San Francisco bookshop around the corner, and sure enough, they got it. And I've just started to read that. And yeah, and so I'm now wondering whether Glick is actually part of that symbolist tradition. I don't know how far to go with that. I'm still thinking about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I rather rambling answer to your question, which is this is such an important collection, I think, for the poet as well as for the development of her poetry and for the appreciation of her poetry.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this, yeah, I like the way you put it because it's hard to describe. It is, but there's like, yeah, you can obviously see the growth and maturity. I think particularly when you're reading through the book, start to finish, I think you really, the garden kind of really is Glick's way of, at least, now that she's doing this, purposely or consciously or whatever, maybe she is, but just when you're reading through, you're like, oh yes, this is a young poet becoming a mature poet. Like as you're reading through this book. And I was
Yeah,
just curious, yeah, because it's almost been looming in the previous two episodes. Again, go
it
listen to
has
those
been,
listeners.
it
Yeah,
has been, it has been looming, and I think for her afterwards, it still loomed. I
yeah,
think it follows her throughout the rest of her career, and she's still trying to work out the things that happened over that period when she wrote this book, which you can imagine it. I mean, it feels like it's been written in a rush, but
yeah.
actually, it's like 5 years or something, isn't it? From um,
Surprisingly,
House on Marshland.
yeah, surprisingly quickly read and short for a book that took, yeah, 5 years to compose. Especially
Yeah,
considering she goes down. I mean, again, she did this in previous books, but it's a little more, it's cleaner, as we already said. Like yeah, it's better structured, but it's also like she seems like she's challenging herself with poems like The Garden, these multiple parts that have multiple facets to them too. It's not just it's taking some like a symbol like the garden and then approaching it from four or five different ways that all work within the poem, and those are very neatly, tightly wrapped up in their individual sections, and you move from one to the other.
yeah,
It's just very, very graceful. But
yeah,
I just wanted you to kind of, because I know it's going to come up. It's going to come up as we're talking this, but your theory on Glick and her dead sister and stuff with descending figure and stuff, as I know it's going to come up. But Damon has had this theory again. Listeners that have listened to the first 6.5, 7 hours of us talking about Glick have heard it a little bit, but this is the one where it's going to come in here too, because this is the one, Damon, right? Like I was
it
just
is.
turning to it, and of course I've read this like 3 times now because we've been planning to go into it a few different episodes, but still, this for the third time in like 3 months since we started this. I was thinking the dedication. So for my mother and father and for John, and I was just thinking dedication for my mother and father. I wrote in my notes, I was like, oh well, here it is, Damon. Here it is
Here
for
it
my
is.
mother and father. Here it is.
Yeah. Well, uh, the let's start with the title, I think,
Yeah.
because that's where the sister is. That's where the other sister is. She talks about it as her other sister, which is kind of confusing because I think a non-Glick reader might think, oh, she's got another sister, but she's not talking about another living sister. She's talking about an unliving sister. She's talking about a dead sister, and it is really confusing, I think.
Yeah.
But it's there in the title. So, so descending figure. What is the descending figure? Have you had any theories about that, Andrew?
I haven't like a lot of Glick's stuff. I feel like it is s simplistically vague in terms of like it could be so simple that we tend to overthink it or something or anything like
Yeah,
that. But I mean, if we take it literally, we'll start there, I guess, with a literal kind of what would descending figure, those two terms together in a figurative language kind of thing mean. Clearly
yeah,
descending, going down, and then a figure, it could be a shadow or anything, coming down the steps almost as something I think of in modern terms, descending figure. It makes me think of ascending a staircase or
yeah,
something like that. I never really think of like escalators or elevators or anything when I'm think of that. If I hear the word descending, I would always think stairs. If my brain would
yeah.
always go to that. So I don't know. What
Yes,
do
you're
you
going
think?
down. You're going down.
Because
Well,
that's
I
the
mean,
literal, like,
then
okay, this is literal, but now, this is a poetry podcast. We like to get a little beyond the literal.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. What
Well,
do you think?
some commentators they refer to the descending for that. They say, well, it's death. So
Okay.
we established in our that how fascinated Click is with death, and she wants to write about that. That's one of her big subjects. Um, and I thought, well, that's not really right. I didn't really like that. But the answer is linked to the Greek concept of katabasis. And I was introduced to katabasis on a podcast actually by Alex Andreou and Alex Andreou called Podyssey. Have you come across Podyssey?
No, no.
Okay, well it's a podcast about the Greek myths
Oh, okay.
and yeah, and yeah, Podyssey, and it's really pun on Odyssey, and it's a really nice kind of like sort of a quite original take on it. It's Alex is not afraid to talk about it just from his own point of view,
Right.
and there's music and there's involved, and he has guests as well, and it's really interesting. It's a really interesting listen. So I'd really highly recommend that. Anyway, katabasis means descent in Greek, and it refers to a belief in submersion into tragedy. So in classical thought, that means descent into the underworld or the subconscious as a means to face the reality of what has been lost. And many human cultures apparently include underworld mythology. Uh, so from this, there are two meanings to the title. Obviously, because of Glick's long-term interest in Greek mythology that she experienced when she was a child, with stories read to her by her father. We're thinking about Hades here, so the Greek version of the underworld, and in particular the Orphic myth, the myth of Orpheus, who goes into the underworld to rescue his great love, Eurydice, who's been bitten in the ankle by a snake. So I think Glick is identifying on multiple levels here. So she's identifying herself as Orpheus, which is presumptuous, definitely. But she's really asking the question, what is the power of poetry? Can poetry overcome death? Can poetry still nature in the way that Orpheus was able to still nature when he picked up his lyre and started playing? Can it, can I? Am I as good a poet Orpheus. I mean, she's so ambitious that I think that she probably asked herself that question. If I write a poem, is that going to be as good as Orpheus and give me the right or a ticket to descend into the underworld and find my other sister, find my deceased sister who died
Yeah,
after 7 days.
there's even
Really
direct, I
can't.
mean, yeah, there's direct, I mean, obviously, because she loves this stuff anyway, there's direct references to a lot of the Greek myths, particularly, swans, black swans, the black feathers, and like blood and things like that. And then I think there's actually a poem in this called like Aphrodite as well, right?
Yeah, well, there's one called Swan, isn't there? I haven't looked at the black feathers, but they do come in. Um,
It always makes me
so
think of that. Maybe it is referring to Yeats or
yeah,
uh
yeah,
about the Greek, a poem about the Greek myth from the here, like kind of like it's like
yeah,
through a couple different filters. But yeah. If I'm
sure.
automatically connected the black feathers to Greek mythology, but maybe it's to the Yeats poem about Greek mythology that I'm thinking of, right?
Well,
Um,
we could try and find that. I mean, so she's identifying with Orpheus and the myth of Orpheus, and she's also thinking, could I go into the underworld and find my other sister? But there's also the the idea that the descending figure is her sister, and the figure of her sister has already descended herself. So you've got at least these three different um, sort of what do you call them? I mean,
yeah,
these different.
interpretations or yeah,
Well, no, these three crazy possibilities,
right,
within the title descending figure. So
yeah.
she's opening up a staircase and into the underworld and through her imagination and into those staircases, into as many staircases will start pouring all these different people.
It's interesting too because a lot of the Greek mythology, I guess they do refer to when you enter the underworld, it is almost like a staircase, kind of going down, 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 endlessly till
Yeah,
you get to that river, and then yeah,
yes, yes,
it is kind of almost like like a temple or a cave or a
yeah,
descending figure. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna keep coming up, listener. We're gonna keep referring back to it, and obviously keep all of those possibilities in mind, and that can affect interpretation. That's the fun of this, right? So that's where we're gonna go with this, but. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, this book too, it was strange because it's not like you said, you referenced almost, you made reference to this in previous episodes, little soul, little
yes,
soul. And I was thinking almost like the figure could even be something like a little soul or a soul itself or some type of spiritual, I don't know, essence is what we're trying to capture when we say a soul, right? Or something like
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, we go back and forth between life and death, and then in this book particular, she does it in all the books we've covered so far, but in this one in particular, like you said, she's kind of going back and forth between these images of death and life and stuff, and sometimes in the same poem, in like
oh yeah,
especially those longer ones with the multiple parts. But I don't know, it's
yeah.
interesting. We'll get into it. I mean, where did you want to start with this? Well, I guess let's start at the beginning with the garden. The first section is split into three sections, listeners, as most of her books are split into multiple sections here. And the
Yeah.
first one is the garden. Obviously, we can read into this. We can read into
Well, that's the first section. The first poem in the first section is that poem,
the drowned children.
The Drowned Children.
Yeah.
So the Drowned Children is one of her most famous and infamous poems.
And it's
So
incredibly tight, especially when like because we're reading this in the order where it was like we go from first book to second book to third book. It is so tight. It is so well constructed, as Damon already said. You notice that right away in this book when you're reading them through like this, especially multiple times, like Damon and I have done to prepare for this. It's like, you know, yeah, the drowned children, just the title, the drowned children. What a horrific image.
yes.
I mean, like here we
So
are. The whole book starts with that.
yeah.
Okay.
So um I think I probably ought to read this
Yeah,
because
go
I don't
for it.
think you should because you've got a small infant. So I think I'm going to read it I wish I could find somebody else to read this. Actually, could AI read it or something? Because it's just so traumatic and distressing. Anyway, the drowned children. You see, they have no judgment, so it is natural they should drown. First the ice, taking them in, and then all winter their wool scarves floating behind them as they sink, until at last they are quiet, and the pond lifts them in its manifold dark arms. But death must come to them differently, so close to the beginning, as though they had always been blind and weightless. Therefore the rest is dreamed, the lamp, the good white cloth that covered the table, their bodies. And yet they hear the names they used, like lures, slipping over the pond. What are you waiting for? Come home, lost in the waters, blue and permanent. So it's about some children. They're wearing scarves, woolen scarves. So it's cold, which is always bad news with Glick. It's cold. It could even be icy. They maybe walked over the ice and the ice has cracked and they've fallen through the ice and there's no one to save them.
Very New England, yeah.
Yeah. Is that New England? Because
People have said things about climate change in like the recent kind of, last 50 years, but if you lived in that part of the country, the weather is, pretty similar to England and but I mean, the harsh winters in the more northern part of the US where the
yeah,
ponds would all freeze, the lakes would freeze, and you could go play ice hockey or you could skate around or you could just, goof off with your buddies or something. But then there would be parts where, yeah, the sun would thin apart and then you break through. I mean, this is like famous scene in It's a Wonderful Life or whatever, where that's kind of loosely based on like a New England kind of Massachusetts town at that
yeah,
time. All of that's, I
yeah,
mean, there's just something about frozen water, and there's like a sense of danger. There's just I don't know if it's just me that has always felt that, but there's just if it's just been drilled into me culturally or whatever it is, but just kind of my parents, whatever it was, but just frozen water, be cautious. Like be very careful with
yeah.
frozen water. It was just always
But
drilled
also, yeah,
in like because it just
yeah,
takes one slip through and then you're under. And then if you're under and there's a current, you can't get back out. Like you can't get
yeah. But
back.
swimming pools, ponds, still water,
Yeah,
always, it's right up there with the parents' sort of alert system, isn't it? And I suppose the first question that maybe a non-poetry lover, um, or somebody encountering this poem for the first time would ask is, why would anyone write a poem like this?
right,
And that's not an easy question to answer
right.
because why would anyone write a poem like this? Why would anyone write a poem this violent, uh, this this kind of fatal? I mean, the tone is very neutral. She doesn't express any sympathy. She's not trying to deal with the after effects of what happens when children die. She seems almost callous. And when this poem was published, it attracted quite a lot of criticism. Um, Greg Kuzma, another poet, said that Glick was a child hater. Um, and
You can see that in some of her work, honestly. Yeah, she was not super fond of children, but also like all of Glick's stuff, she was. Like it's
yeah,
this weird contradiction. Yeah.
exactly. So, and there's a lot of trying, genuinely, if you read on the web some responses to this poem, people find it very, very difficult. I think
Yeah.
I was quite drawn to Glick, but then suddenly I came across the drowned children, and I just couldn't understand why a woman and a mother would write that. Why did she do it? And then it's sort of head in hands moments, and then often it takes some years, according to some of the things I've read, and they say why, and then they they sort of go to the they sort of go to the end of the poem, and they try and find some kind of they try and find some kind of comfort in that. They think that perhaps the children are lifted up somehow. Maybe it's slightly, maybe death is connected to dreaming, which is obviously a very ancient poetic trope. Maybe there's some kind of salvation here at work, which I can't really understand because it's not really properly expressed. Um, so I went back to this my book that I've got. What's it called? Proofs and was it Proofs and
Proofs.
Theories,
Yeah.
which is a collection of essays by critics, people who really know what they're talking about. And one's called Paul Breslin, and this is a quote from something that he says. He says, writing about this poem, he says, "The pond finally gets its active predicate lifts." So that's in the first stanza, and the pond lifts them in its manifold dark arms. The life-taking water has more agency than the parents who cared for the children, who have the least agency of all. What do you think about that?
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
pond is actually a better parent than the parent. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how sort of twisted and convoluted, you know, so this poetry criticism can be, because the trying to find a way through. And he goes on to write, the poem, I mean, I don't agree with that, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I don't think that a pond is a better parent than a parent.
And I don't even think it's clear that that's what she's saying at all. Yeah, yeah, that's a
No, I don't think she's, no,
conjecture. Yeah,
yeah.
conjecture. Yeah.
Well, we're going to get to what she's trying to say, I think. So the poem refuses the romantic consolation of reabsorption into nature and asks the harsh question that goes back to Sophocles, is it best never to be born? I think that's a lot closer to what Glick is talking about. There is this sort of there is this romantic, if you've gone to a natural burial, then a lot of the text will be about how the presence of nature um, are somehow taking back
Right.
the spirit and the life of the deceased.
Right. Circle of life, loosely kind of
Exactly.
circle of life, whether that's tied
Yeah.
up in spiritual or religious stuff as well, but kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, circle of life.
And it's a very comforting idea,
Yeah.
and it goes back to romantic pantheism, and it's very reassuring. But I don't think that's what this poem's I don't think that's what this poem's about. Um, so there
So,
are there are lots of different I mean, another reaction I picked up from a website called Permanalysis, which I've actually just joined. Actually, it's quite an interesting site.
hmm,
It says the poem is not going to lament the loss. The poet says the children were ignorant of what they were doing. So that particular reading puts the poem into this position of a siren. So again it's a symbolist idea that the pond is somehow, or the body of water is somehow connected to what has happened, which is a symbolist idea. And these poems about when children die, there aren't many of them. I haven't had a chance yet. Well, I have had a chance, but I haven't taken that chance because my Blake is somewhere or other in a box. But there aren't that many attempts at writing about tragic things that happen to children. Obviously, one of them is a refusal to mourn the death by fire of a child in London by Dylan Thomas. And that's a really interesting comparison, where Thomas is saying that he refuses to try and re-enter the innocent state of a child because to do that would be to murder all the deaths of all the children all the way going back, and to signify that that one death was in somehow not as tragic as all of the others. And the poem ends with his line, "After the first death, there is no other." It's a beautiful poem. But there just aren't there just aren't very many of them.
And there's some vague light reference, I would say, to Dickinson in terms of Dickinson did this with her occasionally with throwing dead children. Occasionally there'd be like dead children in her beautifully rhymed, like little
Yeah,
happy-go-lucky rhythm that she would do. There would be
yeah,
like dead children or something, and whatever, mid 19th century, I'm sure there were dead children much more frequently than there are now, but it's still kind of, for whatever reason, illness, drowning in the lake, whatever it is, but like yeah, I wonder if she's trying to pay homage to something like that, even like the old poets that were writing about this, even. But
yeah,
I mean, just that first line is absolutely devastating. I mean, you see, comma, they have no judgment, period. So that's unusual for Glick as well to have one sentence and one line like that, short like that, but very commanding. You see, they have no judgment. So it is natural that they should drown. So it
yeah,
is natural that they should drown.
yeah.
First, the ice taking them in, and then all winter, their wool scarves floating behind them as they sink.
Look, Andrew, I've read it once. We don't want to read it again.
Until at last they're quiet. I mean, that's the first two sentences.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's pretty hard to see that as anything other than death. Yeah, to see, and I mean, of course, the title is called Drowned Children, so we already have death framing it. Pretty hard to interpret that, I think, in any other way than, yeah, children maybe falling through the ice or something, playing on a frozen lake or pond and then falling through the ice and drowning. I mean, pretty hard to interpret that, I think, any other way, right? I mean,
you
as we've
can't.
just been said, yeah, and then the
Yeah,
pond, this is where it gets, and then the pond lifts them in its manifold dark arms, lifts them in its dark arms, almost like, I mean, maybe we say going, almost ascending instead of descending, but also descending but ascending at the same time is kind of opposites, right? Going to
yeah.
death but also ascending upwards. We could talk about heaven, we could talk about afterlife, something, but I think,
No, ascending is a thing with Glick.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So descending and ascending, yeah, that's fine.
yeah. And then we get this stanza break here. So it shifts slightly, and she does this more, I notice, in this book, where the from stanza to stanza, themes, maybe even in her persona's entire character shifts or attitude shifts from stanza to stanza in some of the longer ones. She makes
Yeah.
it more obvious in those when you're usually numbered, which implies, a change in some way to a different set of thoughts or whatever. So we get the second stanza, the change, but death must come to them differently. It's almost like the speaker is contemplating, must come to them differently, so close to the beginning. Obviously, okay, that's an easy one. They're young, but so must come to them differently, as though they
Mm,
had always been blind and weightless. Almost like you said, I think that's where maybe people get torn up in that, almost thinking that the speaker or Glick in this case is minimizing the death through that in
exactly.
some way.
Exactly. Mm, mm,
Minimizing, or maybe because then the next couple lines almost imply that it's almost romanticizing a little bit. Therefore, the rest is dreamed. The lamp, which, what the hell's the lamp? The good white cloth that covered the table. So now we're almost in an interior thing. And then
mm,
their bodies kind of put them with these. We have dreamed, the lamp, the good white cloth that covered the tables. We have these kind of domestic things as we go from dream to the lamp to the tablecloth, and then
mm,
back to their bodies. I don't know. I mean,
hmm.
that's where I think it's easy to get tripped up here because it's doing so many things at once here, almost contradictory things at once, which I mean, as we talked about, this is Glick's style. I mean, these multiple kind of things in tension with one another.
It is. I mean, I think that's
But
fairly straightforward, which is it's the Irish practice of the wake, where you lay the body, you lay the suited body or the well-dressed body out onto the table for 3 days, um, and you basically have a kind of a long extended period, which is part party, part reminiscence, part grieving, part old friends coming together with um, the generations, across the generations. Uh,
that's where I think,
so
therefore, the
so
rest.
that all works. That all
L-
works.
Like this is where we have little type of like the rest. What do we think we're being referred to as the rest if after this sentence as though they had always been blind and weightless, therefore the rest. Obviously, if we're doing sentence like structure, the rest is probably referring to what the
Therefore,
rest
the
of their
rest is dream.
life, the rest of their life or something, the rest of their,
Could
you
could
know,
be, Andrew. Okay, hang on a sec. But death must come to them differently, so close to the beginning, as though, yeah, you're right. So the rest is the rest of their lives. Yeah. So so death must come to them differently, so close to the beginning. So it's not the same as if death would come at the end of your life. Um, so they've got to dream about the rest of their life because they haven't lived it. And they're dreaming about that while they're sort of on the table. And it's not the first time that a dead child has been on the table. We cannot get away from that poem. Thanksgiving,
but
can we, with the turkey? You know,
there's another one
yeah,
in here we're gonna get to, yeah.
yeah, it's not
And
the
then
first. Yeah,
I think that last stanza is really what throws like kind of another haywire in there, where it's and yet they hear the
yeah,
names they used. The
yes,
names they used, I guess referring to the children's names, like Lure
yes.
slipping over the pond, a great line. And then this
Yeah.
kind of like italicized almost as if it's speech implied here. What are you waiting for? Come home, lost in the waters, blue and permanent. I don't know. It leaves kind of an open-ended thing here.
Well, I think that's a Yeats connection, as we said
Yeah.
in the last pod. You know, come away, stolen child, to the waters and the wild, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Something like that. I didn't quite get it right. Um, so I
Which
think that's
has
the
that I think you're 100% right on that too, because I think listeners listening to this too, that is intentional, right? We're supposed to be pulling in now the context of that poem into this
yeah,
poem. Like that's the reason you would put a line that mirrors it, or as like Bloom would say, something like, influences it or alludes to it in some way, the ALL allude. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
that's
so
right.
that definitely can help inform us if we're trying to interpret something like this. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
So I think that's the voice of the music. That's an Orphic element. So
going
um
into the underworld. Yeah.
well it's Orphic in the sense of music. So um which is I suppose there's two ways of looking at Orpheus playing his lyre, not his lyre, his lyre. Either either he's either all nature stills and stops and listens to Orpheus playing the lyre. The birds stop singing, they all cluster round, they don't want to make a noise. The leaves, the music of the leaves in the trees, anything noisy or rattling stops. It all becomes motionless. There's a stillness because of the power of the music and the power of the song, because of course Orpheus would have been singing, he wouldn't have been reciting poetry, he would have been singing it or reciting it in a sung form to music. So there's that, or you could say that the music of the poetry is changing the way that nature normally moves. So rivers, instead of moving forwards, they start to move backwards in order to listen to, because they're so entranced by 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 the sound of the music.
Yeah.
And nature starts to sort of move in ways that um, that sort of recognize and maybe even participate in the poetry. So I think you've got these two things sort of happening at 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 the same time, really. Um, so it you can pick however it's however which one appeals to you the most. And so this is a kind of Orphic little, how would you describe it? Little lyric. It's a little
Yeah.
lyric, isn't it? Being sung. What are you waiting for? Come home, lost in the waters, blue and permanent. And to me, that's like very open, you
Yeah.
know, that is very, very open. Um, because that's how that's how that's how Oppen saw it. I mean, in his daybook, I've got a reference here, daybook 5. Oppen wrote these daybooks, which are like, they're called daybooks, but they're like a kind of diary, and he started them in Mexico when they were in Mexico. And he continued them on, and he didn't date any of them, so it's really it's really really difficult to figure out when they were written. And they're just kind of sort of thoughts, I think, that came to him at various times. And he said, Orphic said, colon, the trees moved when he sang. The boat moved down the ways. He sang to the birds and reached the dead. So for him, for Oppen, it's very much catharsis as opposed to catharsis. So
Yeah.
instead of descending, it's like, well, as he writes here, the gradual ascent of the soul to the world of being. So through the power of the music, you can go down into the underworld, and then you can gradually ascend as well from the underworld to
Right.
participate in the music. And he's sort of talking like a lot of, a few poets do, the really, really ambitious ones. How far can I go in this project? Is poetry really like that?
Right.
Can it actually do those kind of mystical, incredible, wonderful things?
Yeah.
Or is it just in my mind? So that, I
Absolutely.
think, is what the last three lines of the drowned children, that little lyrical passage.
Yeah, it's interesting where you read that criticism right before we went into this poem with well, they said something about the parents, right? And I was just thinking, I was like,
Mm,
even bringing parents into this, there are no
mm,
parents in the poem. Like the parent, there's
no.
like they're like, so you're bringing something into the poem to help fill in the gaps, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes that's intentional, but then I always think like, yeah, it's just something for listeners to watch out for. The reason Damon and I were rubbed the wrong way by that criticism is because we felt like it was bringing something into the poem that isn't there to make that kind of point, where it's like yeah, you're almost doing too much to try and interpret something. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that's interesting because we talked about this the last couple of times as kind of her transition, like you said, almost to the symbolic or the lyric is more important than like the narrative being cohesive and understanding, And people
yes,
that are into
yeah,
this already
yeah,
know, right? Like lyric versus narrative. Those are the two big categories of poetry, but like the lyric is underloved in the kind of modern world here in the contemporary world. Um,
and
so
the
I don't know.
episodic, yeah,
Yeah.
and the episodic, which is based upon sort of phraseology, really, phrases and letters, short messages. Yeah,
And it's interesting how like yeah, as she's maturing, she's more interested in that kind of the lyric and the symbolic than making a coherent kind of story or judgment even like as we were just trying to interpret the drowned children here. I mean, there are
so
gaps and
yeah,
intentionally so, but also, be careful how you fill those gaps in. Yeah, we don't want to be too overzealous with filling in some of those gaps because it can cloud the meaning and stuff that we're
yeah,
trying to
we
get
don't
out
want
of it.
to we don't want to race to the edge of the
Yeah,
edge of the ice.
exactly, exactly, exactly.
So I
And
guess the question is, we have to say, okay, so what is this? What is this poem about? Why has Glick written it? What she, what on earth was she thinking? Really?
w-
So
like,
I,
no,
what?
yeah, go on, yeah,
Yeah. So I quite early on, really, in my reading of Glick, because you can't get around this poem. It's like a supernova, one of her supernovas. So before you start reading her through or something, you get to this poem, and it's often when you start reading a poet and you think, well, I'm going to start with this poem, and if I don't like it, I'm not reading anymore, And if I do like it, I might carry on reading. And you'd think that that would be fatal for Glick, but because you'd read this poem and say, right, that's it, I'm not reading anymore. But it isn't somehow, because there are so many ideas tied up in the Drowned Children. And a lot of those ideas are to do with, why did I write this in the first place?
right,
What was my starting point? Why, why did I feel so compelled to to write this and to print it and to put it in a book.
To start the whole
And
collection.
presumably,
Yeah.
and presumably she read this out in public readings,
Right.
scaring everybody. And so I started to say, okay, so what's her idea about children? So I then started to sort of look at our friends about children. Obviously, we came across the school children in the last pod about, on the house in Marshland. And then I came across this poem, Brown Circle, and it's in Ararat. So we're talking about several collections later. But it's really all about children, and it's called Brown Circle. And there is a bit of an open thing going on here, but I won't talk about that. I'll just read it out. Have you got your um
Glick.
Louise Glück
Yeah,
poems?
yeah,
Yeah? You
yeah.
want to find it? It's on page
What page?
222.
222.
222.
Okay, so I haven't read this one, but this is in, yeah, okay.
Well, why don't you read this one? Yeah, go on then, if you've got
Okay.
it there.
Brown circle. My mother wants to know why, if I hate family so much, I went ahead and had one. I don't answer my mother. What I hated was being a child, having no choice about what people I loved. I don't love my son the way I meant to love him. I thought I'd be the lover of orchids who finds red trillium growing in the pine shade and doesn't touch it, doesn't need to possess it. What I am is the scientist who comes to that flower with a magnifying glass and doesn't leave, though the sun burns a brown circle of grass around the flower, which is more or less the way my mother loved me. I must learn to forgive my mother now that I'm helpless to spare my son.
Yeah, yeah. And if you look across the page, Andrew, you'll see children coming home from school.
Hmm.
And on section 2, do you want to read that? Just the opening lines of that?
Yeah, it says, so the second section of that, it says, my son accuses me of his unhappiness, not in words, but in the way he stares at the ground, inching slowly up the driveway. He knows I'm watching. That's why he greets the cat, to show he's capable of open affection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Well, that's a great poem too. We should carry on reading that.
Oh yeah.
But the point that we're coming back to is that Glick she's not writing here in a literal sense about children drowning. Throughout Descending Figure, her water phobia is increasing and increasing. And water obviously is connected with the womb and children developing in the womb in a kind of watery environment. And we've come across many references to her very difficult relationship with water. So water and children's sort of go together. And I think one of the founding principles of how this poem came to be. So she's not literally imagining children as drowning. What she's doing is she's putting together that water phobia and the vulnerability of children, which you've just expressed in the poem,
Right.
that you just read out,
And I think
and in the
there's like
section.
a level of grief to this poem too. Like it's
Yeah,
obviously that first line is kind of ice cold. You see they have no judgment. But there is like a level of almost grieving over this in the poem, despite it being kind of cold
yeah.
or matter of fact about that grief or that these young
But what
lives
she's
lost.
but what she's saying, as yeah, absolutely. What she's saying is children are stuck.
Right.
They are stuck, and
Frozen in the frozen in the ice. Yeah.
yeah, as in the poem you just read out. Um, my mother wants to know why, if I hate family so much, I went ahead and had one. And it finishes, well, said, well, I had I just did because whatever, whatever. She doesn't really go into that, but for her, that's a sort of, well, I did. My mother wants to know the answer, but I'm not sure what the answer is. I just did. And then she says, I don't love my son the way I meant to love him.
Right.
So they're both in that sort of, they're both in that sort of inability to develop emotionally or to develop at all, really. And then the poem ends, I must learn to forgive my mother now that I'm helpless to spare my son. So whatever it is that's restraining her and holding her back, there's nothing she can do about it. So she can't spare her own son from her son, who's a child, his vulnerability. He just has to be vulnerable because he's a child, and all children are vulnerable. And her other sister was vulnerable, who died after 7 days. And she couldn't be spared either because she
Right.
was vulnerable. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Not if you're a pond, not if you're a parent, not if you're a child, not if you're a mother. So
That's
we go back. So we go back to the opening of the grandchildren. You see, they have no judgment, so it is natural that they should drown. So what she's saying is that because they are in a state of naivety, they're told, that the argument is presented to them. This is your home. These are the only people that you will meet, and you will have to decide from this set of people, the ones that you love, the ones you don't. You have to go to school. Um, you you have to go through the routine of having a mother who's maybe sometimes emotionally not there for you. As the Americans say, I think they invented that phrase. Um, and and so it's natural that you're going to experience vulnerability, and sometimes that vulnerability is going to tip over into something more
right.
tragic. And that's what she's saying. She's saying the child is in a situation for one reason only, and that is because they are a child. And all children are in this situation.
Yeah, when you say that, it made me think too that this Glick's a lot of her stuff, and I think this is why maybe some people struggle to interpret is she is about those subtle vulnerabilities. So much of it is about these we're like, oh, it's a contradiction, but it's a contradiction because the both feelings are there when you're that vulnerable. Your contradicting feelings are everywhere and stuff, and even like the circumstances of your life can be contradictory and vulnerable. Yeah, I don't know. It
Yeah,
might be a good way to think about it too. Yeah, the vulnerabilities that she tries to capture.
yeah. So
Uh,
this is the and but what one thing that children do have, and I'm not sure in Glick that the adults have this. One of the things that the children do have is a soul. So whatever happens to a child, they do have this recent experience with being given a soul, like in the Pixar movie Soul. Have you seen the Pixar movie Soul?
I haven't. No.
I think it's worth seeing. I mean, I saw it a while ago now,
Yeah, I think when that came
but
out, it was like 2018, 2019, or something like that.
it was it was supposed to be released in 2020, and then they held it back
Oh,
because of
right, right.
COVID, I think. And then it came out a bit. I think it was finally it was released, I think, in November 2020, but it also was properly released after that as well. And it's a kind of a great, sort of comment on soul, although it did stir up a lot of controversy because it was a jazz pianist who,
Yeah, it was
uh,
John Batiste or what was his name?
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
He was on Colbert. He was
yeah,
Colbert's main band leader until after that movie got huge, and then he was okay. I'm moving on to bigger and better.
yeah,
I think he
yeah,
just left that a few years ago.
yeah, yeah. It
Won
certainly
the
did get.
Oscar, I think. Yeah, won the Oscar for Best Animated, I think, that year
Yeah,
as
I think
well.
it won. I think it won two Oscars actually.
Maybe
Yeah,
for the
I think it was
music as well.
nominated for four. Um, and
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
you've got all these souls, and they're in this realm called the zone. Now, in Hades, when you die, you go down to Hades. In the
Right.
Greek sense what happens is you descend into the halls of judgment, and then from the halls of judgment you can depart into one of three directions, and the direction where these souls of children, indeterminate souls, would go, that would be similar to the zone, and in the film, so the soul, and in Greek mythology, those are called the asphodel fields, the fields of asphodel, which is a flower, and in the film Soul, these little souls, they go around, they haven't got any names, and yet they hear the names they use, like lures slipping over the pond. That's, I just read from a couple of lines from Drowned Children. What they do pick up is little, that's my mother's phrase. They pick up emotions, so like excitement,
Right.
happiness, sadness, but they don't know why they're picking up these emotions. It hasn't really all come together, and it's got to come together in order for that soul to then fall into this big sort of round well, and then the soul is then received into a living body as the living body is born. And it's the job of all these, I think they're called Jerrys in the film, to work it all out, which soul is going to which body. And what these little souls have to do is they have to try and find a spark. And that spark is the animating principle of their life. I'm going to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And that's what sort of collects all of these different diverse emotions and gives them a real purpose. And then that's when they can be sent off to be a soul in a living person. So the soul is, a huge, huge theme in Glick. That's why she wants to go into the underworld. That's what she thinks children have got that adults haven't got. And it's all sort of bound around that idea.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's going to keep coming up, listeners, as we go through this too. The soul is going to, as like the previous episodes, I mean, she's constantly doing this. I do want to touch the garden here, but I've had a lot of coffee, David. I got to pee real quick.
Okay.
I'll be back in a couple minutes, 2 minutes here.
Okay.
We'll start
Sure.
the garden.
So you want to go into the garden?
Yeah, the garden. And again, this is the second poem in that, since we've only gotten through one poem in an hour here. We'll, as always happens. That's why we didn't even try to do 2 books this time, listeners. We knew we weren't going to get into 2 books, so we're just doing one at a time. But
you can't really with this one.
yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to touch on it, one, I think it's good, but also I think it does really show that the mature tone, a kind of there's a sharpness to the cadence, instead of kind of relying on that fierce, violent, kind of almost shocking stuff. Like maybe we could even say the Drowning Children is more like kind of that Glick from her earlier work that's almost shocking when you're reading through some of her stuff, violence to it. Than her earlier work. This one, I think, just epitomizes like her growth into this third book here. Not only is it so well structured, you have these different sections, you have this different each of them are different, right? We have birth, the garden, the fear of love, origins, the fear of burial. So we're staying
Yeah.
with the birth and death themes and all that, but yeah,
Okay,
particularly
so
that
she's
second section, particularly that
yeah.
second section really I thought was great.
Okay, so she's put the drowned children at the start of this book. That's all about ideas that she's only written about 4 poems before that, which sort of suggests that this poem might be possible. And then she thought, okay, I'm going to leave that there, and now I'm going to talk about other things. So it's not, which is very typical of Glick. So it's not she's not talking about the soul in the garden, and it's quite a long poem, isn't it? It's like 1, 2, 3 pages long, and it's in, as you said, it's in 5 sections. Yeah. So there's a little reference at the end, but to bodies and to body soul narrative, but it's just a little thing really. And what she's talking about, I mean, I've written Gethsemane, and then I put Blick Garden, and then I put with 3 exclamation marks because this is this is like I think this is like a little portrait of Blick's own garden. That's what I think,
Yeah,
and
and it's
all the things that she thinks is in there.
or even the way it's segmented here in these numbered sections, but also the fact that this is it's not the title poem, but it's like the garden, and this is what the section is called, the garden. It almost feels like it's hitting all the themes in the book, where this the fear
Yeah,
of birth, the fear of
yeah,
burial, the fear of love. Like I
yes.
always like we talked about last episode, there's like a reluctance to a lot of Glick's love poems.
Yes.
Origins
You
and the
want,
garden could be interpreted a little bit more, but whatever. That just maybe we could just make this claim and see what listeners and we think of it. But yeah, I don't
why
know,
don't
almost like
I
it's yeah,
why don't I read the second section, which is the garden, and then you read after that, you read 3, the fear of love.
sure.
'Cause I think that's well expressed. You know,
Well,
it's
yeah.
got the garden with all these things growing in. Okay, so to the garden. The garden admires you. For your sake, it smears itself with green pigment, the ecstatic reds of the roses, so that you will come to it with your lovers. And the willows, see how it is shaped these green tents of silence. Yet there is something you need, your body so soft, so alive, among the stone animals. Admit that it is terrible to be like them, beyond harm.
That line, particularly those two lines, really the very first part of that I have starred, and then like that very last two. The garden
Mm,
admires you,
mm.
period. Another one of those very short, very direct sentences that she started doing. And I mean, she did that in another book too, but I feel like that, especially for first lines, even in the very beginning of the, we didn't read it, but the first line of this whole poem is one sound, period. Like
Yeah,
just
but
two.
it would be quite a strange experience, isn't it, to step out into your garden and think, oh, the God, everything I can see is admiring me, and then
Yes.
a few lines later think, well, it's terrible to be like that, you know, beyond harm. You know, they can't be affected, the garden can't be affected, and therefore their admiration means nothing. You know, it's sort of she starts you off on a high, and then she just shatters it completely, and that's her going into her garden.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to read The Fear of Love?
Yeah. Three, the fear of love. That body lying beside me like obedient stone. Once its eyes seemed to be opening, we could have spoken. At that time it was winter already. By day the sun rose in its helmet of fire, and at night also, mirrored in the moon. Its light passed over us freely, as though we had lain down in order to leave no shadows, only these two shallow dents in the snow. And the past, as always, stretched before us, still, complex, impenetrable. How long did we lie there, as, arms in arm in their cloaks of feathers, the gods walked down from the mountain we built for them?
Yeah. So she's not long married. Um, I, I, I do find her autobiography very confusing. I don't know why. I mean, it's not particularly confusing, but something about it. I don't know. It's like emotionally sort of like an electric buzzer. You just don't want to sort of, you know. Um, but so this is a Lane in Bed poem, comes from the Lane in Bed set of poems, and she's just inserted that there. The fear of love. I mean, what's she scared of? Why has she called it the fear of love?
Yeah. In Glick's stuff, especially, there's that maybe it is back to that vulnerability thing where you said the fear of vulnerability, even.
That body
Uh,
lying beside me like obedient stone. Once its eyes seemed to be opening, we could have spoken. So I think this is like it's going wrong. Maybe there are a couple of other poems in this collection which do suggest that. Um, so this is in the Lane in Bed poems. Louise Glück is at her most content. She's suspended between these emotional states, and I often think of that. You know, when I wake up in the morning, I often think of that Samuel Johnson quote that um, says, "You never feel better than when you wake up in your own bed." And uh, I think it's quite true.
oh yeah.
You feel that sort of, you wake up and you think, "Oh, I'm okay." I feel something's happened during the night. Everything's been sort of rearranged somehow. And physically, I'm talking about, not necessarily mentally. And, I'm much better than I thought. Well, much better than I was last night. I'm sort of somehow the body sort of rebalances itself when you wake up, and sometimes you feel really great when you wake up, don't you? Samuel Johnson was absolutely right, and this is a happy place for Glick, and this collection contains one of her best poems. For me, it's called Happiness, and that is um, it's sort of riffing on the same on the same idea. So she's put them. Things happen when Louise Glick is lying in bed, and sure enough, things are happening here, aren't they? Two shallow dents in the snow. Oh, God, that's two. That's them both sleeping, making two dents in the sheets. She's turned it. She's turned it into snow, which is always bad news. And the past is always stretched before us, still complex, impenetrable. How long did we lie there? So they they're 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 in this bed and they don't really know what to do next. Really, he's an obedient stone. They could have been speaking, but they're not. They're running out of things to do. Maybe it's not good. It's not good.
And you
But
think about it,
that's yeah,
these are all things that have to kind of grow, right? Like obviously the poem is called The Garden. We have the fear of birth, the fear of love, an actual physical garden where we have the kind of most straightforward, the origins, again, growth, birth, and the fear of burial. Maybe the burial is the one thing that doesn't have to do with growing, but all of these other things have to grow, right? You get birthed and then grow, then kind of the fear, love has to grow, a garden has to grow.
yeah,
You have to kind of grow out of your origins,
yeah, yeah.
and
And
maybe
then
the
at the
burial's
yeah,
the end of that growth or something. But
yeah. And then I think she's just giving us a kind of an overview, really.
and
She's yeah,
this is the first hint I got of seeing, like we talked about this before, about the kind of themes that travel throughout her entire career. This is the first glimpse, especially in that second section, the garden
yeah,
admires you, was my first glimmer of the wild iris stuff that is
yeah,
going to come, 15 years later here. First glimmer
yeah.
of that, where I was like
That's
this, and
right.
it telling that that's one of the most powerful sections of this too, where she
Yeah,
really thrives in this metaphor of the garden, growing flowers. She just, yeah, stone monuments or stone statues in a garden, like just very she really thrives in that kind of metaphorical landscape.
Yeah, he's prefiguring it,
Yeah,
and we come across
exactly.
that. We come across that. We come across that before.
And a natural, I mean, it's always that's part of the fun of doing something like this is seeing all those little Easter egg, the little bits of pieces that made up her whole career of culminating 15 years, 20 years later in this huge book that everybody, agrees is a masterpiece. At least you should, listeners, The Wild Iris.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, fantastic. I know that's a long one, so we don't have to read all of it or anything. What did you? We have to hit the title poem. Was there anything else you wanted to hit?
Well, I just want to go through this sort of first section because the first section is
Yeah,
only 6 poems in it, which is really
very short.
it's really sort of what she's doing is
Sowing seeds almost, the garden. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the first reference to bread and milk, so that's a sort of to me that's a little warning bell.
And I want to get
And
to you about this too in the second section. I think that there's a
yeah,
very stark shift when
yeah,
we get into the second section there,
yeah,
and then an even more stark shift when you get to the like this is one of her most graceful in terms of that like and obviously it just comes with maturity and pride and she's been doing this for 15 years at this point, writing poems and stuff, but like it's like yeah, just
yeah,
there's a drastic kind of how the sections work with one another too, and obviously I mean we think that's intentional, she did that on purpose, but
yeah.
it's just
So she's
yeah.
kind of, she's a bit she's a bit hands off, I think, there and in Palais de Art and Pieta. She's sort of saying, okay, not absolutely going all in on these. I'm just giving you a sort of preview almost of what's what I might be thinking, and then we get to Descending Figure and Thanksgiving, which are the last 2 poems. So yeah, so Descending Figure, very important
I was just thinking, Damon, you
poem.
said you just had your trip to France here, and then I was just fitting that we're going into Glick, who loved, French
Yeah,
culture and French words to
yeah,
use them all the time, and
yeah,
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 very, very appropriate to to be wandering the streets of Paris and then coming in
yeah.
here
Although
and
although
talking
Glick
Glick.
although Glick being Glick, when she was in France, because her family went over and stayed there for quite an extended period, I think she refused to learn French.
Of course, of
I mean, how
course.
do you explain that? So she's in a place she knows it's really important. She knows she's lucky to be there. It's like kind of epicenter of so much. So what's my response going to be? I know. I just won't cooperate and I won't learn French. Full stop. Why aren't you learning
Very
French,
Glick,
Louise?
very
Why aren't you learning
Glick.
French, Louise? I'm just not doing it. Why aren't you doing it? I'm not doing it. Can you explain to me why you're not doing it? No, I just don't want to do it,
She seems like the
mummy.
type who, if everybody wanted her to do something, she would intentionally dig her heels in
Yeah,
and not.
absolutely.
She seems like that
Absolutely.
type.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe a lot of artists are. They just don't like to be told what to do, even if it's
yeah.
detrimental to themselves in some
I'm
way. Yeah.
I'm like that. I'm not as extreme as Louis,
Yeah,
but yep, I'm like that.
of
Yep,
course.
renowned for it.
But, given all we talked about with the title, I was just thinking of this title poem. And again, it's a very ambitious. We have three sections here, and they're all carefully laid out with the wanderer, the sick child, and the final one for my sister. Where I don't
Absolutely.
know. I mean, reading this poem, I mean, obviously we'll read it together here, but I don't know. Let's read it and we'll think if it helps us understand anything or makes it
Well,
muddies it up or
number
what. Yeah.
number number two, section two is the sick child, isn't it? And that is that is a that is a painting in the Rijksmuseum, and I think it's from 1660. And she's obviously seen that painting. A small child is ill, has wakened. So the child's vulnerable. So you could say, going back to the drowned children, you could see the small child is ill. No, you could see, how am I doing this? You can see the small child is wakened. It is natural she should be ill because in the painting, the child is obviously a girl. So it's another expression of a child's vulnerability and their helplessness. A small child is ill, has wakened. It is winter, as always. Past midnight in Antwerp. Above a wooden chest, the stars shine. The child relaxes in her mother's arms. The mother does not sleep. She stares fixedly into the bright museum. By spring, the child will die. Then it is wrong, wrong to hold her. Right. I don't think we need to explain that, do we? Uh, Let her be alone, without memory, as the others wake terrified, scraping the dark paint from their faces. So, so it's a reprise, really, of her approaching the drowned children. And she's
Yeah.
saying the same thing about children there, or this particular child there, that she was saying in the ground in the drowned children.
And even like yeah, and I think this even the sections are obviously are separated for a reason, but I think we have these different stories that make up different descending figures, culminating in the third part for my sister, right?
Mm, mm.
Um, because I
So
think even
then,
that the very
uh,
like in the first section that the last couple lines are just often I would let my own name glide past me, though I craved its protection. And I'm thinking of the drowned children now where and yet they hear the names they used, like Lur slipping over the pond. Often I would let my own name glide past me, though I craved its protection.
mm, mm. Okay. And and then in the third section for my sister,
Yeah. And this is the
this
big
is
one.
the
Yeah.
this is the descending figure. So, or maybe she should be the ascending and descending figure, because as we said earlier, there's an ascension as well as a as well as descending as well. But the when the soul of her sister ascends, it's not to be realized. It's it's simply to be it's simply to be noticed by the living who might have a mystical or a psychic connection, which Glick does with her sister.
Right.
So far away, my sister is moving in her crib. I I think her crib, maybe that stands for the whole of the underworld. It's not like a baby in a crib. The dead ones are like that, always the last to quiet. Because however long they lie in the earth, they will not learn to speak, but remain uncertainly pressing against the wooden bars, so small the leaves hold them down. What do you think the wooden bars are? I suppose that's the wooden bars of a crib, but
Yeah.
is I think that's a bit misleading. I don't really like that bit because it sort of goes against where the rest of the stanza is going. So the sister is in the Asphodel meadows, the meadows in Hades with all the other children living in an uncertain existence. Glick has this sort of psychic connection to her, and that's pulling her into the direction of her sister, and her sister is being pulled, as Glick would like to think, into the direction of herself or of a new living being.
Yeah. The crib is being used in a couple different ways here.
Mm,
So we have the crib, I think in the first stanza there is literal crib. Far away, my sister is moving in her crib. And then we got the dead ones are like that, always the last to quiet. Because however long they lie in the earth, so now we're automatically like death has already happened. However long they lie in the earth, they will not learn to speak because it's yeah a baby that didn't have a chance to, but remain uncertainly pressing against the wooden bars. And again, referring back to that crib from the first stanza in that section, so small the leaves hold them down.
mm,
Even leaves holding you down because you're just so weak and little. It's a little, couple day old baby sister that she had. Now, if she had a voice, the cries of hunger would be beginning. I should go to her. Perhaps if I sang very softly, her skin so white, her head covered with black feathers. Dot, 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 dot. We don't even get an ending in this. The ending
yeah.
is this forever extension. And this is where I got the black feathers. I
Hmm.
kept thinking of Lena and the Swan. I kept thinking of the kind of the black feathers of the origin story of a lot of these Greek myths are like born from birds or whatever, or like an egg, or like like this kind of the black feathers, blood. I don't know. There's just I
But it's
was like, yeah,
there's a circularity there, isn't it? Because you could go, now she had a voice, the cries of hunger would be beginning. I should go to her. Perhaps if I sang very softly, her skin so white, her head covered with black feathers. At twilight, I went into the street. The sun hung low in the iron sky, rummaged with cold plumage. So at the end of the poem, it kind of goes back to the beginning of the poem.
it creates a circle,
Yeah.
a full
And then you've got,
circle.
exactly. And then you've got this incredibly sad lines here, just a little way down. Along the curb, groups of children were playing in the dry leaves. We just had the leaves, haven't we? So small the leaves hold them down. That's in the last bit.
That's almost a reference maybe even to Greek tragedy, right? The circular kind of stuff that I'm thinking Oedipus, or the never-ending circle of trying to get out of this circle, but you're still, you're inevitably going to end up where you began, kind of thing.
Circle of circle of life. I
Yeah,
don't
in that
know.
sense, but like even a more metaphorical sense than that too. Like even a
Yeah,
more like,
yeah.
a drowning or something. The more you kick, the faster you drown or something. Like you just the more you try to get out of it, the more you stay where you are or something. I don't
I think
know.
it. I think it's for her. It's the circularity of living and dying. That's what she's talking about, and she's sort of made a physical. She's made a physical model of this, hasn't she? In this
Forever, maybe even the
poem.
descending spiral, forever a circular kind of
Yeah,
descension spiral kind of down.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
and
interesting. Shout
it's
out. I was a guest on a podcast that like last year where we talked about John Berryman, but it was the same. He had a poem in his dream songs. We were going to shout out to Art of Darkness and Brad and Kevin over there where we talked about this where it was like forever repeating. It was supposed to forever repeat itself as you read, like it was kind of implied with the use of ellipses like this too, to
yeah,
start back at the beginning, kind of and keep going and going and kind of this circular thing that never ends. If you want
yeah.
it to be that way, the reader would have to choose when to end it, I guess. But
I think that's where we are. Everyone was gone. I was playing in the dark street with my other sister, whom death had made so lonely. Oh, isn't that sad? Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. So she wants to go and play with her sister, and she's trying. She's actually saying here, I was playing in the dark street with my other sister. So she's saying I did get back, and I did enter the underworld, and I did find my sister, and I was playing with her. Whether
yeah,
that was in the rest of the dream or oh, but gosh, so sad, really. Often I would let my own name glide past me, though I craved its protection. So she's suggesting there that she'd be willing to take her sister's place. And who decides those things anyway?
and just the structure even in this, like I was reading through that first thing as you like, if I could write to you about this emptiness, M dash, cut it off, new sentence, along the curb, groups of children were playing in the dry leaves. Like it just this kind of her structural aspect to this is being used in tandem with those metaphors, with those images, with those symbols and the lyric kind of style. And it just works so beautifully in this. Like
Mm,
it's interesting as we've been doing this, Damon. We've only 3 books in here. It just gets better and better. I feel like each time we go into a new book, like the poetry is just a treat, you know,
yeah,
to keep witnessing Glick kind of grow
it
and
is,
grow
but
here.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's sad to read though, isn't it, Andrew?
Yes.
It's not
There's a
uplifting.
darkness to all of her stuff. Yes. She had and I don't want to get into like, oh, she was depressed.
No,
People are depressed all the time. Maybe she was, but there is a darkness to her, and it's a strange darkness. This is why I think we struggle to kind of deter. There's a tenderness to this darkness. And I've
Yeah.
said this before. I know listeners have heard it on the previous episodes. Damon's heard it before, but I can't get over how she manages to make that darkness a little bit tender in only the way that Glick can. Only the way it's sad, it's devastating, but then there's a little bit of like longing, tender. I don't know. She just manages to capture
Well,
this very
I've got a couple.
vulnerable in between space. Yeah.
I've got a couple of theories about that
Let's
actually,
hear them.
and
Let's go.
you know,
Yeah.
to come. We're not talking about it now, but one's at the very end where there's I've got
Okay.
something I want to say about all of this, and then the other one is sort of something that a critic said about her, which I thought, oh, that's yeah, yeah, that really works. So, well, that's nice to have.
Do we want to hit
That's a
that
really nice.
Thanksgiving, the second Thanksgiving poem
Yeah, that's really
on the
nice to
next?
have. That's really nice to have. Yeah, that's a really nice narrative around sending people. It has that's the second very important poem in this collection. First one being the drowned children, and then and then Thanksgiving. I mean, I don't think we need to make too much of that, really. It's just that end bit, isn't it?
This one I wanted to ask you about too, because I think obviously it's related because she had a poem already called Thanksgiving, and this isn't like
Mm,
Thanksgiving 2 or anything else, it's called the same thing. But I think
mm.
she is making clear that it's a different Thanksgiving than the one
Yep,
in Firstborn.
I think she is. Yep,
Um,
I think she
but
is. She's talking about her assembled landscape,
and there's a little
which,
it's
yep.
almost a little simpler too than that first one. Like a little uh yeah, I don't know.
I think it goes back to the assembled landscape in All Hallows, um, and something of the garden. This could almost have been a section in the garden, really.
Right.
In the cleared field, they linger. Um, so it's like a sort of open landscape sort of situation. But she's put down all of her symbolism, all of her. Yeah, is Glick a symbolist? Is she? I don't know. We're going to have to talk about this more. But anyway, the dry leaves, the wind, the snow.
Hmm.
God, the perpetual snow. You know, it's the hooves, lots of horses coming in later. Well, a few anyway. And so she's done all that. She's created this little scene, and then little, there's my mother again. She's created this scene, and then she finishes, they can afford to die. They have their place in the dying order.
The
That's
the
the
dying
whole
order.
poem. The whole
Wow.
poem is written so she can say that at the end.
And there's that
She wants to say that.
and there's that constant. I know Thanksgiving is more of like an American thing where there's like there is that constant underlining thing of obviously giving thanks, but then also like the kind of circle of life, right? Like when people do Thanksgiving celebrations, US style, like it's not always, of course, and people have their own traditions, but there is this kind of idea of the reverence around the tradition, the presidential turkey pardon and stuff like, it's this little dumb, gimmick thing that doesn't really matter, but there's a symbolism in it that like the dying order made me think of that, right? Like the circle of life, the kind of we're symbolically pardoning a turkey from death on the day that we would use it to, kind of eat it up
Is that
and fill
is that
ourselves up with it.
is
But
is that a thing that the president
oh
pardons
yes,
the
oh
turkey?
yes. I think it started in like the 70s or something. So it's not that old of a tradition, but it's been kind of a tradition every year. It's just like a press conference. The president stands on the White House lawn with his press people, and they have a big turkey, and he, says, "I hereby pardon this turkey from death, from being killed on Thanksgiving or whatever."
Oh,
And it's
it's a presidential
yes,
pardon for turkey. Oh,
yes,
okay.
exactly. And it's
Right.
like this one is not going to be slaughtered today, but the others, enjoy your turkey at home, but we're going to save this one. And I think it is a symbolic kind of little thing about the dying order, or maybe I don't know.
Okay,
I
so
just made
what
me think of it because
so
Thanksgiving, it's
yeah.
very American, and then the reverence around it. There is this, and again, not everybody does this. Some people are cynical about it. Sure, it's a dumb holiday. It doesn't really matter that much, but to give thanks. It literally is like most people, if they don't pray, maybe they say a prayer before that, like the family feast or something. Even if it's not a religious prayer, it's kind of a let's be thankful thing. Maybe
I think
even
what
families would have
I
traditions like go around the table and say what you're thankful for or something like that. Like it is
I
again
think that's
varying
a
degrees
like
of seriousness,
yeah
but yeah, it is kind of
yeah.
treated in
It's those
this.
kind of it's
Yeah.
those kind of it's those kind of things that make Europeans wonder about Americans, I think. But
It's just we have so many resources. We do whatever the fuck we want. Yeah, with these holidays here, we just yeah. As before we gorge ourselves on food,
yeah
like I don't know, there's like this kind of idea to be grateful,
yeah
to be
yeah
reflective. It's almost
yeah
like a holiday about being reflective. Like there's no
yeah
other tradition. It isn't the exact date that the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth. Like it's not, it's just kind of this established tradition to be thankful. So it's interesting that Glick uses that. Obviously, it's a very American thing, but like uses that tradition in these poems in a way to frame the poems, at least, in this.
sure.
And
I mean,
usually
I
it's more
think that the
cheerful too. It's more happy family gathering, almost like a Christmas holiday, something like that, like,
I think what she's saying is the Thanksgiving is completely ironic.
yeah.
I think that she's not giving thanks for anything, and,
Yes.
and I think I think they have the dying order is simply where you when you die. So it's at the end of this section because it starts with the children dying, but in her mind it starts with the baby dying, her sister at 7 days old. That's her dying order. So it starts with that
And there's the
baby
the
dying, then it moves up to children dying, then it moves up to um adults, well, adolescents, adults dying, and then finally, when you actually do die, if you've reached that advanced age. So the dying order is simply when you die
that
for her.
and there's this vague they have come again to graze the orchard. And we don't really get what that they is, but we keep getting they can afford to die. They have their place. Like I mean, my mind immediately goes to like a herd of deer or something like that, like wandering through a barren winter landscape. Um,
Okay, so
uh,
I've only got a speculative response to that, which is that again with the wild iris, you've got
yeah,
this, you've got these sort of argumentative, you've got this kind of argumentative backdrop underneath the lawn, going on and on and on, seeds, roots, bulbs, all trying to establish themselves into growth.
this,
What they have come again to graze the orchard, I think I think again of those sort of souls in the movie Soul falling down, having
right,
found the spark of life. I think these are souls. The souls have come to graze the orchard,
right.
knowing they will be denied.
More
So
metaphorical.
there's
Yeah.
and the orchard, I think, the Asphodel Meadows. Why can't I say meadows? The Asphodel Meadows. They don't really go together, those two words, do they? Anyway, in where they're uncertain. The only thing that these children have got is a vague recollection of their names, which is why Glick offering to give her name up for her sister is quite moving in descending figure.
Yeah, and I think even the literal interpretation we could think like observing an orchard or something, or like a barren winter landscape where you see something, but then we do the more metaphorical with the framing of Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
that they could very much be a person, a group of people,
yeah,
or even souls if we want to go
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Souls, and so the souls are like dry leaves, and they're
And
rattling around in the wind, and they're having further bad treatment.
they have come
But
again,
yeah,
again and again. The Thanksgiving, the tradition that happens every year, they have come again, and
mm,
usually it is like a moment where family travels. The thing in America is the day before Thanksgiving is the worst travel day in the entire year. Like it is everyone trying to get across the country and get a rental car,
right,
whatever,
yeah,
just traffic. everybody
Yeah.
flying everywhere. Like it's just one of the busiest travel days. I've traveled on that day
Okay.
before, and it is a disaster going through airports. Like, yeah, with that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But I don't know. So they have come again. Almost there's like this, like, oh, it's repeated. It's a repeating action too. Like the dying order is a
Yeah.
repeated kind of action here.
We could
But I don't
be
know. I don't know. Yeah.
we could be completely wrong about that.
Yeah,
I
of
mean, I think
course.
that,
Yeah.
that
Reading into it too much. Yeah.
there are some Blick poems where you're not quite sure what's going on, and you almost get the feeling that she doesn't either. Um, but I think that's definitely one of them. But
Yeah,
anyway,
when this podcast was still new in its first year, my original co-host and I, we read Jonathan Culler's The Theory of the Lyric.
yeah,
Um, and there are parts,
I've read about half of that.
it's a tough one to get through. He's not that
No.
interesting.
And he doesn't actually, he never defines the theory of the lyric, does he? So he
Yeah.
never defines what the lyric is, which is really annoying.
But what I was thinking of is that he tries to make an argument, however poorly in that, for the appreciation of the lyric. And I'm just thinking, yeah, I was like, huh, I wonder if I should revisit that because I just thought of it now with us trying to interpret this. With, oh, maybe we're reading too much. Yeah, it is a challenge. It's a challenge. And how do you seriously engage with something that, like that without being, too indulgent of your own personal. I mean, of course, you can do that if you want. That's fine. But yeah, I don't know. It would just made me think of it briefly, just for a fleeting second here.
Yeah,
It's like, huh, I'm thinking back to it that conversation from like 3 years ago where I was thinking about the lyric and like how
yeah,
we interpret it and what's the point of a lyric poem, like
yeah.
if
I,
it's not going to give you a satisfying narrative or a satisfying interpretation, if it's going to elude you in that way. I don't know, it
yeah,
does start to be like, what is the point of composing and then reading lyric poetry? And then not only that, enjoying it too. Like if we don't even know what we're enjoying out of it, maybe that's part of the magic, the mystery. I don't know. I don't know. We don't want to get too far, but I don't know. I just started thinking of it
yeah,
with you mentioning that and
yeah.
thinking of trying to interpret
I
this
think
poem. And
I think the theory of the lyric, stayed under my bed for like back sort of quite a long time, and I kept on, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it. So I just put it into
it's one of those
a
books,
sort
yeah.
of the bedside, the bedside table on the other side of our bed, and
And
sort of
it's
stayed there
it's
for
dry.
a long time. And then I thought, I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it somewhere. I'm not going to see it because it's like really, really annoying book.
I thought about
Oh,
this for a while. I was like, man, I'd love to, if the podcast goes on long enough and I'm able to do it, maybe revisiting some of those works and seeing how I feel 10 years later or something going, I don't
well,
know, maybe something
does
like
that
that
seem
will
like
happen eventually.
does that seem like an agonizingly long time ago when you started?
No, it feels like almost yesterday.
Really?
It's
Gosh.
maybe it's just my personality, but I really do remember most of what, especially maybe because I care about it in this sense. I really do remember almost every conversation that I have about books on this show because
Mm,
I'm constantly thinking about it. Is why I call it an ongoing conversation because then we'll read something a year or two, 2 years, 3 years later now, and it just suddenly recalls that conversation I had 3 years ago about, when it's
mm.
in the context of this, I'm not going to think about that while I'm watching TV, or maybe I will. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. And that's one of the main enjoyments I think I do get out of doing this because, it's not like I'm
Right.
getting rewarded for it any other way. It's
No,
yeah,
not
it's
quite.
just my personal kind of enjoyment and yeah, spreading deep passion for the art, but also trying to spread understanding and yeah, have some fun and we just kind of interpret and go over this stuff. So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, let's
Okay.
move to the second section here because I wanted to ask you about this second section
Yeah.
because it's called the mirror, listeners. For those going into the second section, it almost seems like there's a deliberate kind of vagueness. There's a lot of vague he's, they's, the others, these kind of nothing specific. Uh, husband and wife, just kind of these vague stand-in things. But I think that's intentional for this. The mirror, like this whole section is maybe supposed to be like some reflective thing or like literally holding a mirror. We could think of it. I don't know. I just said, did you sense that at all? Am I reading too much into it? Did I just pull that out of my ass? I don't know. Did you get any sense of that in the moving from the first section to the second section?
No, completely. I mean, she's left her sister behind. So the descendant
Yes.
figure of her sister is now not going to be picked up again until the last section. And she's bringing in all these other subjects, which are kind of a sort of lots and lots of subjects, really, aren't they? Different subjects. I mean, there's a new set of poems comes in the end of the relationship poem I've got here, which is another set of, and that starts the section off. So that belongs to that, and that's an important poem. I've got that marked down. That's another difficult word. Epithalamion. 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 Can you say that? Epi,
Epithalamium?
yeah, epithalamion. And an epitham, well, you say it, an epithalamion works upon epi and thalamos, and it's the nuptial chamber. So it's another classical reference. And Sappho is believed to have composed one. Um, and I picked one out by Catullus. Do you want to hear that one? It's only
Yeah.
very short.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
said, let the new bride appear, let the new bride appear, so she can now be viewed. And listen to my words. See, the torches scatter the golden sparks. So that's an example of uh, an epithalamion written by Catullus. But it's sort of like awake, 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 awake. Here are the themes. Awake, awake. Here are the subjects that I can write poetry about and I can write poetry upon. And it's not necessarily to do with Hades. It's not necessarily to do with the soul, but it's all quite exciting stuff, really, I think.
I mean, there's so many great lines in that too. I didn't even pick out this poem to read because I mean, there's so many we could go into, but I was just rereading it as we're talking about it. Just so much pain in the world, the formless grief of the body, whose language is hunger. And that's open-ended with the M dash there too. Cut it off quickly. Whose language is hunger. And I think that becomes a theme kind of shifting this whole book, even because then we get to the kind of dedication to hunger. We get to this kind of, and I think even the dedication to hunger, when we get to that poem, it's about obviously her eating disorder, and there's parts of that, but also the desire, the hunger more broadly, right? The hunger for love, the hunger for pleasure, the hunger for family, whatever it is, the hunger for glory, these desires that we fit in this hunger, whose language is hungry, the grief of the body, the formless grief of the body, whose language is hunger. And in the hall, the boxed roses, what they mean is chaos. That is a fantastic line. Then begins the terrible charity of marriage. The terrible,
The terrible charity of marriage.
yes.
That's really weird because I read that as, I've read this poem a few times,
Oh,
and
yes.
I've always read the terrible clarity of marriage. I've never read
Freudian slip. Freudian.
the terrible charity of marriage.
It's because you
God,
actually enjoyed your marriage for some reason. It's because you
yeah,
actually enjoy your
exactly,
life.
exactly. I
That's
thought,
how I feel too. It's like I actually enjoy my marriage. It's a
yeah,
charity to me. Yeah. But to Glick, it's like she's giving charity. Yeah. The charity of marriage. Yeah.
wow, God, I hope her partner didn't read this. Do you think they get, God, do you think,
Husband
is
and
that what she
wife.
really thought?
I think
Wow,
there is it's one of those
that's harsh.
things where as again, for somebody like her, a beautiful woman that could have anyone she wanted, like there's this kind of maybe it was always this kind, and I don't know, it goes to like a constant kind of, there's this very dark underlying like thing that kind of hits you over the head, but then there's almost a slight tenderness to it. Here is my
Mm,
hand, he said, but that was long ago. Here is my hand that will not harm you. it just, I mean, there's some little like the charity of marriage, but also, she's still human. She
Yeah.
wants love and touch and
I've yeah,
companionship and,
exactly.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
but there's
absolutely,
a
Andrew.
there's a reluctance to it. There's this suspicion to it. The feelings, the good feelings of being in love and having a life partner for many years and that love growing over those many years and like there's like a suspicion of it like and it really obviously adds depth to her work, but it just raises all these questions, yeah, about
Yeah. I
like
mean,
you said, yeah.
I've got a line from that saying, well, that's not true. You know, here is my hand that will not harm you.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, it does harm her. It does. So if it's charity, it's uh anyway, can we look at this poem, The Mirror?
yes, yes, let's
Now,
do it,
if
yes,
you remember me mentioning this in
yes.
first form and saying if I'd written this poem, I would never have published it, let alone read it out loud in public. I'm going to read it now.
Let's hear it, yeah.
Watching you in the mirror, I wonder what is it like to be so beautiful, and why you do not love but cut yourself shaving like a blind man. I think you let me stare, so you can turn against yourself with greater violence, needing to show me how you scrape the flesh away scornfully and without hesitation, until I see you correctly as a man bleeding, not the reflection I desire. Now that is horrendous. She's probably in bed, maybe. Um, or she's sort of half in, half out of bed, and she's looked across at her husband or her lover or whoever she's in a relationship with, um, shaving. And she's thought, instead of shaving your beard or your stubble, why didn't you shave the whole of your flesh away from your head until there's nothing left but white bone underneath and blood? And that is an anorexic poem. So you said, how is it, how did you phrase it? You said, um, at the beginning, you said, um, of, of, of the anorexic hunger. That's right. You're talking about
Yeah, yeah,
the hunger of this, the hunger of that. What this poem is the hunger of perfection. And it provides a real insight into her medical condition when she was younger, which is that's what she was thinking of. I mean, you know, I have known one anorexic, but obviously it's very hard for us who haven't had that condition to understand it. But I think one of the driving factors, apart from childhood trauma, is this this desire to look a certain way,
right.
this desire to be. Now, what could be more perfect
Mirror, mirror on the
than,
wall, right? Who
yeah,
is the fairest of them all? Yeah.
yeah. But oh God, I should find myself. I'm so glad we got to that point. I don't have to read it anymore.
And
It's
almost
so-
this again, we Gretel in Darkness, like the previous episode, this almost fairy tale like, even though there's not directly referencing a specific fairy tale, I think it is like that, the mirror, mirror on the wall kind of like,
Yeah, there's a savagery, isn't there?
yeah,
Like it's fairy tale savagery.
the vainness, the kind of taking that modern thing and thinking about the realistic premises of that too,
Yeah,
like making it
yeah,
real humans instead of a fairy tale here. How would you approach that kind of think? And I think it is something like mirrors. Even more recently, I know there's some, but most reflective surfaces, people are looking at themselves when you walk by a
yeah.
store window or a car window or like a parked car on the street. You kind of glance yourself real quickly to judge yourself, even how you look.
And also making Insta stories.
Yeah,
It's becoming quite noticeable that you'll see somebody walking past you with their camera on in reverse.
yeah.
So it's actually filming themselves as they're moving through, and they're constantly checking into the camera like that in order to sort of assert the mirrorness as you
Yeah.
say, of um of what they're doing. It's becoming. I mean, I saw it a lot in Paris, uh, and it's sort of quite. It's sort of it does take you back a bit. You know, it's sort of why are they doing that? You know, and it's a really self-conscious act of filming themselves,
Yeah.
and then they touch themselves as they're sort of filming it in sort of places that they're sort of wanting to film.
You notice that especially in social media. Obviously, this is before social media existed, but it's the same concept, even taken like, times 10, basically in the social media
Yeah,
world, where you see that what's becoming big is the talking to the camera while maybe doing your makeup or something or doing
yeah,
something. And there's this constant kind of, you can see it in their eyes where they flick to that little corner where you can see yourself as you're filming yourself, their eyes constantly go to that little corner of the screen to check, to check, to check. I find myself doing it. If I'm on something that I know is going to be like public video on YouTube, obviously I don't wear what I'm wearing now, but like I'll wear like more appropriate clothing. I'll maybe get a haircut or something so I don't look like a slob because I know that's
yeah.
going out to the public. And it does make me more self-conscious about how do I look when I'm saying something like this? Do I look like a crazy person? Do I look like a slob, or do I look like somebody should be taken seriously? Uh,
I don't know. I don't
yeah, I don't
know.
know. Yeah, maybe we're going too far too with this, but
So anyway, the another aspect of this anorexia, this hunger that you were talking about, is Glick's asking what is the status of a body? What is the status of men and women's bodies? She's asking that question. You remember in the last pod I said she loves to torture herself with these sort of questions that she can't really answer. None of us can. So she's saying, what is the status of men and women's bodies? And she's saying, what happens? I think she's sort of thinking, what happens? And I think for her, the afterlife's full of children. It's not really full of adults. I think that when an adult dies, for her, it goes back to the state of the child. And I think that's because there's something dominant about, as she says, the dying order.
maybe
So I
return to the
think that
soul. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think that if you die really, really young, I think that's the dominant element. And if you die much later on, you will return to that dominant element as if you had been that dominant element, or you will, there's something about that. I mean, I haven't read all the way through Glick, so I'm not really sure how this is going to work out or pan out, but that's my feeling is that if you're older and you die, you'll go back into being the soul of a child, I think. And the portrait, which is the poem that follows the mirror, is her description of that happening. A child draws the outline of a body. Now, I think she's talking about herself. I think she's talking about other children. I think she's talking about her child. I think she's talking about her sister. But because it's female, it's probably either her or her sister. She draws what she can, but it is white all through. She cannot fill it in what she knows is there. She cannot fill in what she knows is there. Within the unsupported line, she knows that life is missing. She has cut one background out from another. Like a child, she turns to her mother, and you draw the heart against the emptiness she has created. So that's a description of a soul. A
Yeah.
child can only fill in part of the picture, but the soul is still there, but only in outline, and it's white all the way through. And it's her asking about bodies, what are bodies for, what do bodies do, and that is going to move into the next section, Lamentations, where God appears, sort of for the first time, and
Right.
she's saying, how can we attract the attention of God if we have a perfect body? Does that mean that God's going to notice us more? Going back to that sort of spark in soul, that sets a little soul. Stop it! Not a little soul that sets a soul on the way to being united with a physical life. Um, how can I look good for God? Basically, what? Right,
Yeah.
how do you answer that? How do you answer that question?
Yeah.
The little sign going on my side.
Yeah, there's
Um, yeah. And then with your theme on hunger, on tango, which is I've got marked as an important poem.
yeah.
Again, you've got that hunger back in on the second stanza. I watched you through the bars, both of us actively starving. Come, she said, come to mother. You stood, you tottered forward. You tottered towards the inescapable body. Yeah.
Yeah. And tango too, right? I think that's deliberate, right? This kind of clearly another type of love or romance style. This kind of reluctant love or romance that we always get from Glick here, this tango.
Yeah. Mm.
Remember
So the
how we
so the
used to
tango
dance? Yeah.
so the tango is it's her and her sister Therese. So they're tangoing in their childhood. And I don't think this is a particularly successful because I mean children don't really tango. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a stretch. I'm not getting that.
Right.
I'm are you
Almost
getting that?
that. No, not the specific dance, because the tango is obviously a specific dance, but
Mm,
there's that famous phrase, maybe it's only American. If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard. Or the kind of a colloquialism where it takes two to tango,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can't do that dance by yourself. You have to have a dance partner with it. Maybe she's referring to that loosely, or maybe just using tango as this kind of and this is section two, one, two, three, four, and they're all pretty long sections. They're not titled like the other ones, though, in each of these sections here. And it moves from, yeah, we have this kind of, on evenings like this 20 years ago, we sit under the table, the adults' hands drum on our heads, so we imply that there's children speaking through this. The
Mm,
contagious vernacular, remember how we used to dance, inseparable, back and forth across the living room. Adios, muchachos, like an insect moving on a mirror. Envy is a dance too. The need to hurt binds you to your partner. Yeah, and then you thrash in the crib, your small mouth circling the ancient repetitions. I watched you through the bars, both of us, actively starving. In the
um,
other room, our parents merged into the one totemic creature. Come, she said, come to mother. You stood, you tottered toward the inescapable body. Yeah,
mm. I
I'm,
think, I think this is. I mean, it's hard to read a poem like that next to a poem next to portrait, isn't it? And next to the mirror, because it's actually a little bit light-hearted. I think it's in the wrong place. It's one of it should be an Ararat, I think,
yeah.
which is much more about contains a lot more poetry about family life. It's not really in the right place here, and that's quite common with Glick, which is why I wanted to reorder the poems in the beginning in order to try and make it a little bit more less.
This is,
Um, yeah.
and obviously I don't want to get, psychoanalyze Glick that much here. Most listeners know that I'm very against that, but it's also, I wonder, this is why I'm constantly obsessed with the performative aspect of being an artist, the performative aspect. you have to, a lot of artists, at least in the 20th century, they would perform this kind of apathy, or they would perform this kind of darkness, or they would perform this kind of, I don't care about relationships, even though it's one of the most basic human needs. Like, I don't care who you are, right? Like, you need some type of companionship, like some way, even if it's not romantic. And then
Yeah,
all of a sudden, there's these kind of these poems that slip out that maybe and again, this is what I mean. I don't want to psychoanalyze here, but I do wonder often how much is an act, how much is an attitude that they want to be perceived as Glick being like, I hate relationships, right? I'm not like other girls. I hate relationships and men and blah blah. But then all of a sudden this thing kind of spills out. This poem, Tango, where you said it's almost more lighthearted. It kind of doesn't even
yeah,
fit the collection.
yeah.
Uh,
So
but then there is
do
this
you think
kind
it's a
of
do you think it's a
this.
pose? Do you think it's a pose she's adopting?
Well, that's why I wonder. I wonder how much of it is exaggerated and how much of it is actually felt. And of course, as an artist,
Yeah,
that's one of the liberties you can take. You can exaggerate or whatever you want, or put a pose on whatever you want. That's part of being an artist. I don't know. I'm just curious. Not that I would accuse her of something like that, but I think it's a question to that I think about occasionally with artists and how much is an act, how, and of course part of art is the performance. So, I'm not faulting any artist for putting on some sort of act, but yeah, I don't know. It was just interesting to me that maybe that's the conflict we constantly see, is that there's this tenderness or this lightheartedness that wants to keep bursting through the kind of cold exterior of Glick
mm.
and Glick's work. I don't know. I mean, I'm
Maybe
just,
she's trying to
spitballing, yeah.
she's trying to lighten it. You mean, but
Or
it's not
even
really.
subconsciously, like she's not consciously
Yeah,
being like, I'm gonna lighten this collection. It just came out of her because it was being pent up, or I don't know. I mean, again, I'm assuming we're speculating here now, listeners. I'm just, you know, just thinking
yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just switch the focus to my living sister, Therese, and maybe include a little, give her some space in this.
Yeah, I mean,
And
the whole thing of the
and
two.
she hasn't really thought it through, I don't think. It definitely feels like in the wrong place to me.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch them, end of section three. I used to watch them all night absorbed in the moon's neutral silver until they were finally blurred, disfigured. Dot, dot, dot. Again, with that kind of ellipses there. And the very last stanza of the whole poem, of two sisters, one is always the watcher, one the dancer.
Yeah, I think
Maybe it's this conflict of, yeah,
she's introducing it for contrast, and she's thinking, okay, I've been talking a lot about my other sister. Let's talk about my real sister. Let's try and put something of what's happening in this other landscape. Maybe let's do something, and it just jars. I don't know. Just for me, it just jars. But it's a clever conceit, I suppose you'd call it in poetry, wouldn't you? Where you're setting up a situation, and then you're kind of seeing what happens, and it's a kind of okay poem, but it's just in the wrong place. And that third section, I mean, we're back in the moon and trembling light, and it doesn't sound good, does it?
yeah.
And that doesn't kind of quite work. And you thrashed in the crib, your small mouth circling the ancient repetitions. I watched you through the bars, both of us actively starving. Yeah, I think it needs more work. Can we say that? Are we
Yeah.
allowed to say that about a laureate? Are we
It's
allowed to say
interesting because that's a thought I did have reading this, whereas I thought this book was very skilled and I was enamored with how mature she was getting, the tone, the structure of it, but that there were a lot of poems that just didn't work for me. Like that, I think
that?
that's that vagueness kind of overpowering certain things. I'm thinking of even the
Yeah,
next poem, Swans, that one, where I sat on it for a little bit here, Damon, and this isn't even one that I was like, oh, let's go over this, but I just think it's a good example of kind of what I'm talking about, where there's a lot of vague references to a you, to these kind of things that we don't get explained as well. You were both quiet, looking out over the water. It was not now, it was years ago, before you were married. The sky above the sea had turned, the odd pale peach color of early evening, from which the sea withdrew, bearing its carved boats. Your bodies were like that. But her face was raised to you, against the dull waves, simplified by passion. Then you raised your hand, and from beyond the frame of the dream, swans came to settle on the scaled water. The sea lay mild as a pool at its edge. You faced her, saying, "These are yours to keep." The horizon burned, releasing its withheld light, and then I woke. But for days, when I tried to imagine you leaving your wife, I saw her motionless before your gift. Always the swans glide unmenacing across the rigid blue of the Pacific Ocean, then rise in a single wave, pure white and devouring. There's just, it
Mm.
moves so much. So we have this scene of swans, that's all it's called. And we could read into this in terms of the Greek mythology, blah, blah, blah. But like, you were both quiet looking out over the water. You were both. So two people. It was not now, it was years ago. So even this kind of time is getting jumbled up in this before you were married. So before the both of them were married or before the it just kind of, and then we get this kind of images of the sky and the water and blah, blah, blah. And then it comes back to this reference of, when I tried to imagine you leaving your wife.
Mm.
I don't know, just a little bit of a vagueness that doesn't quite, like, it doesn't quite work almost. Like she's searching for something
Well,
bigger, deeper, but like this section in particular is kind of these like a withholding almost. It wants to be
yes.
confessional, but it's withholding enough that it's not giving us that. I don't know. I just noticed that, like you said, it kind of this, there were a couple poems in this that I thought didn't quite work, even though I can see what she's trying to do with them. And of course, that's to be expected, listeners. We're nitpicking because this is, Louise Glück we're talking about, but yeah. I don't know. I
Yeah,
did. I
no,
definitely got that. What you were saying. Yeah.
yeah, I, I agree with that. I agree with that. I mean, it's, I, it's suggestive that she's having an affair, doesn't it? It seems like it's got that sort of, it's got that sort of feeling to it. And
She
she's,
seemed like the type who would constantly get involved with affairs or men that were married or had significant others.
yeah,
Like I don't know. People that know her biography can chime in, but she seems like the type. There is a type that is constantly putting themselves in a situation like this. And then,
yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I was in, I saw a film in the Edinburgh, but when I was up in the Edinburgh Festival, uh, this year, I, I saw a film called Islands, which is very much like that. Um, it's sort of set in the it's sort of set in one of those sort of it's Fuerteventura, I think, part of the part of the Spanish Canary Islands, I think, and stars Sam Riley, and he wears sunglasses a lot in this film, and he's living this sort of he's a tennis coach, and and various things happen to him throughout the film, and there's quite a lot of clubbing going on, and he's often like this happens, and then it's just like he's just sort of his emotional cortex is just burnt out. He just sort of he just says, "Okay, I'm still incredibly hungover from last night. These things are happening. I'm not quite sure what it all means. I've got a tennis lesson in a few minutes." And it's that's just because of face that and that poem just reminds me of sort of all the background, that blazing sun, sea. Not quite sure what's going on. Oh, there's a
Yeah.
swan. Fine. It's also got camels. It's got a camel in it. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
And I
and
think,
in Portland, the same you get the same stasis, don't you? The
yeah.
same, you know, it's you stand as rocks stand to which the sea reaches in transparent waves of longing. Everything fixed is marred, and the sea triumphs like all that is false. It's sort of like it's yeah, okay, this is sort of the flux, but it's not really hitting me. It's just part of the flux.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should
For
definitely
whom?
touch on dedication to hunger. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, those last couple lines, I was just reading those too in the Portland
So is this the
1968.
last, that's the last two of this section. Yeah. And to me, this is a kind of portmanteau poem. She she's bringing in, she's sort of putting a lot of themes to do with childhood and um, family life and what it's like to become a woman into into one poem, isn't she? Sort
Yeah.
of got it's got five sections, hasn't it? Um, yeah, and I mean we could talk a lot about that in relationship to Oppen, but um, because of the way it ends, there is no parallel in the natural world. Maybe we'll leave that for another episode because that word world has got a lot of meaning, a lot of often like meanings for
Yeah. Second, sacred
yeah,
objects, very often.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
But
even like the deviation section, section four, that obviously that's the most literal, where we say dedication to hunger, where it begins quietly in certain female children, the fear of death taking as its form. Dedication to hunger, because a woman's body is a grave. It will accept anything. I remember lying in bed at night. Here we go, lying in bed.
yeah,
Yeah, it's things like that. I mean, so talk about straight eating disorders, so the literal hunger, but then also this
yeah.
kind of from the suburbs, the grandmother. Uh,
I felt what I feel now, aligning these words. So she's actually putting us into the writing process here. She's saying, apostrophe, I felt what I feel now. Are you listening to me? I felt what I feel now, aligning these words. It is the same need to perfect, of which death is the mere byproduct. By byproduct. So anorexia, it's a kind of a admission, isn't it? That yeah, you getting that? Of which death is the mere byproduct.
yeah,
So she's kind of like saying, okay, so you've got this need to be perfect in life, and you've got this need to be perfect after death, because if you are perfect after death, then God might notice you in the garden. And so death is just a byproduct of one perfection, or one need for perfection, rather, before there's another need for perfection. So perfection is always unattainable. And yeah, just to go back to the beginning, what the first one is from the suburbs. Yeah, there's a lot about her father there, isn't there?
yeah,
And then, which we might not get into because I don't really know very much about her relationship with her father, except
yeah.
later on. Have you picked up anything about her relationship with her father?
No, but I can imagine that. I mean, she doesn't make it seem like it's good in a lot of this, but of
No,
course
she
we don't.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched the tiny in the second part, the grandmother. Maybe it's about her grandfather here, but I watched the tiny figure changing to a man as he moves toward her. The last light rings in his hair. I do not question their happiness, and he rushes in with his young man's hunger, so proud to have taught her that. His kiss would have been clearly tender.
Mm. So she's doesn't have a problem with her grandparents. I think
Or
that's
the
legit.
very next line is, of course, except it might as well have been his hand over her mouth.
Okay, so she does have a problem with her.
If it is that, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where we get kind of like the feminist thing as well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't solely what her work is about, obviously, but it's always in there, yeah, because of course she
No, and then
was.
the trajectory of the poem then moves into um into what it's into the male experience and the female experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So to be male, always to go back to women and be taken back into the pierced flesh, I suppose memory is stirred. And then the part that you read out, it begins quietly in certain female children, the fear of death taking as its form dedication to hunger. Dedication to hunger. Dedication to hunger. Because a woman's body is a grave. I don't like that line. I mean, it's a great line, but it will accept anything. So I think what she's talking about here is transmogrification. So for her, hunger is 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 an element that is pushing her towards a process of transmogrification, and that's transforming this marriage of her grandparents, is transforming her experience of being a little girl, purposefully swinging her arms as the poem goes, laughing her stark laugh. And then it then reaches into men and women as they're growing up, touching the soft, digressive breast, touching at 15 the interfering flesh that I would sacrifice until the limbs were free. So she's still wanting that perfection. To get there, she's going to have to transmogrify herself, her body. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the so I'm not going to talk about Oppen and the world here, but I might come back to that in a later episode, perhaps. And then the last poem, I really like this poem. This is one of her most successful poems for me. It's a Lane in Bed poem. It's when, as we were talking about earlier, it's called Happiness.
Yeah, I wrote a note on that too. I marked it as well, and I was thinking, Glick writing about happiness. This is
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think she is writing about happiness.
Yeah, yeah.
Or at least, if not happiness, at least contentment, I think. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Should we leave that for the readers to read for themselves?
Yeah, sure, if we want to, yeah.
I do
Move
like
on
the
to the
last line.
next.
I do like the last line though. How calm you are, and the burning wheel passes gently over us. That's lovely, isn't it? So it's sort of like time. We're together. We're lying in bed together, and the burning wheel passes gently over us. Gently over us, Andrew. Gently. You know,
And even before
it's
that, we have the
okay.
mirror. Look at your face, you say, holding your own close to me to make a mirror.
Yeah. So it's not a problem. The mirror is not, for once, it's not a problem. It's yeah. I really like that poem. One of my favorite Glick poems. That.
Yeah.
Okay, so last section, Lamentations.
Lamentations. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Lamentations. This one, again, short section. I mean, I think this whole book, at least in this, was like 40 pages. Very short for a
Yeah,
poetry collection. Most of those, about 50 minimum usually. This one's a little shorter
right.
than that for this, but it's just, huh. All right, so Lamentations, I think we have another shift here as well, and obviously that's by design, the book's structured that way to kind of section off these groups of poems. But I loved Autumnal. I thought this was one where I was like, wow, what a strong poem here. Um,
You want to read
motherhood.
that?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Let's read it.
Yeah.
We'll talk. Autumnal, public sorrow, the acquired, gold of the leaf, the falling off, the prefigured burning of the yield, which is accomplished. At the lake's edge, the metal pails are full vats of fire. So waste is elevated into beauty, and the scattered dead unite in one consuming vision of order. In the end, everything is bare. Above the cold, receptive earth, the trees bend. Beyond, the lake shines, placid, giving back the established blue of heaven. The word is bear. You give and give. You empty yourself into a child, and you survive the automatic loss. Against inhuman landscape, the tree remains a figure for grief. Its form is forced accommodation. At the grave, it is the woman, isn't it, who bends, the spear useless beside her.
The word is bare. You give and give. You empty yourself To a child, and you survive the automatic loss
And then
against
obviously
human lands.
motherhood. It's everywhere in this collection and all of Glick's stuff, but also the changing landscapes, seasons, time passing, death, decay. Autumnal is always the kind of big, historically, and I just think, like, literary wise, autumn is the visible changes. Obviously, spring and winter and all are visible changes, but autumn is the one that everybody sees because the leaves change color, because the weather, the breeze. I mean, autumnal, this kind of
Yeah, it's
that's
almost
the
like
year's
a
almost over. Yeah.
it's almost like a Pieta, though, isn't it? From the from the first from this from the first section where she has a poem with that title. I mean, this is almost like a Mary poem, isn't it? With Christ. The word is bare. Would she say that at the bottom of the cross? The word is bare. You give and give. You empty yourself into a child, and you survive the automatic loss. Against inhuman landscape, the tree remains a figure for grief. So the tree is the crucifix. Its form is forced accommodation. At the grave, it is a woman, isn't it, who bends, the spear useless beside her. Do you think that's the people who guard the tomb and her visiting the tomb in the Garden of Gethsemane? Well, after the Garden of Gethsemane, after the crucifixion.
Hmm. Yeah.
Don't know. It's sort of,
And we could say even, yeah, at the end, in the end, everything is bare, kind of,
hmm.
and the scattered dead unite in one consuming vision of order.
Why do you think she started this last section with that Lamentations?
Hmm. I guess because it is this kind of time passing, this kind of it's interesting because autumn we talk about how beautiful it is that the trees are dying, essentially, like,
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
season, where
yeah.
this
That's
kind
true,
of
Andrew.
and the scattered dead unite in one consuming vision of order. And then, yeah, in the end, everything is bare. Above the cold, receptive earth, the trees bend. Beyond, the lake shines placid, giving back the established blue of heaven. So skyward, whatever. But then we do have this shift here. The
Yeah,
word
that's
is
true.
bare, and it's indented in this way too to show you that shift, almost like a stanza break, but it isn't a stanza break. The word is bare. We shift this kind of what they would call volta, right? Um,
Yeah,
you give and give, you empty yourself into a child. We get this child kind of mothering, kind of coming in all of a sudden, whereas before it almost seems like just kind of, oh, like a lyric poem about nature. It's the autumnal thing, and then all of a sudden it's
yeah.
about
So
children
I
and
mean,
loving someone, and yeah, a woman at the grave.
but this could be an anthropomorphic tree as well, couldn't it? I mean, there's a lovely quote. There's Patricia Lockwood, the poem and the poet and novelist, and she said before she started, she avoided writing poetry for a while because she thought it was all about trees. That's a lovely, that was a lovely sort of quote. But I mean, it could be her talking as a tree, couldn't it? Here, you bear, you give, you give, you give, you empty yourself into a child, your leaves, and you survive the automatic loss. The tree remains a figure for grief. Its form is forced accommodation, isn't it? It could be that too.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, just great.
yeah,
Lamentations.
yeah. So then over the page we've got a bard, which is a poem that's written at dawn, I believe. Um, when two people are separated, is that right? Two people have to separate, I think. Um, and of course, there are some very famous examples of it in poetry. And this is her version.
Yeah, and that's a common, almost callback. So many of the greats have had a poem called Obeyed, or something like that, where they're
Mm,
referring to that specific time, that a specific style of poem.
yeah.
So it makes sense, and especially as she put it in the Lamentations section, the changing. I don't know. I mean, Aphrodite. We have. Uh,
which we read, didn't we? Yeah, a poem or piece of music appropriate to the dawn or early morning, often about lovers separating. Yeah. So they rose from the unexhausted need of the body, unexhausted need of the body, fixing a wish to return. So they've agreed to meet again, and their clothes are not sorted for departure.
yeah,
Okay. And then Aphrodite, which we read, didn't we? I love that poem. Um, it's very open, that poem. Do you remember? It's very objectivist
yeah,
example of objectivism, I felt. Yeah. The only two I've really got written down in this section is The Dream of Morning, World Breaking Apart, and the final poem, The Lamentations.
yeah. I did the same where I only had autumnal morn marked, and then really I've only
Yeah,
marked Lamentations. I was like, okay, we have to go over it because it's important to the section here. But yeah, you want to go into the
yeah,
Dream of Morning? It's strange how that happened, right? Like I didn't even have as many poems marked in this as the previous two. For some reason, I don't know why. Like the ones that clicked with me really clicked with me, but the ones that
yeah.
didn't, I don't know why there were more that just didn't for some reason.
But
Maybe
they're
it was just
all,
me reading it, my mood,
but
whatever. But
but the ones that, as you were saying, when I was what talking about islands, what was that? Swans. Do you remember you were saying
yeah,
that? Um, they're all really structurally nice. They're really well formed, aren't they? There's really good sense of form in all of these, I
yeah,
think, and it supports the collection as a whole, because
yeah,
even yeah, so it's really a very mature collection, I think, and that's one of the reasons. I think you haven't got there aren't sort of, I mean, arguably there might be a couple which are not put together as well as the others, but it's they're all they're all very strong in their own way, I think.
yeah.
So the dream of morning. So what does that mean? It means that you're dreaming about a dream of morning, or are you dreaming about something that you mourned?
Right.
Tricky.
Yeah.
I sleep so you will be alive. It is that simple. That reminds me of that Sylvia Plath line.
It's funny
Uh
you say that. I've got a lot of Plath all through this collection
yeah,
specifically. Yeah.
yeah. I close my eyes and the world drops dead, I think is the line, isn't it? I close my eyes and the world drops dead. I sleep so you will be alive. It is that simple. The dreams themselves are nothing. They are sickness. They are the sickness you control, nothing more. I rush toward you in the summer twilight, not in the real world, but in the buried one where you are waiting. As the wind moves over the bay, toying with it, forcing thin ridges of panic. And then the morning comes, demanding prey. Remember? And the world complies. Last night was different. Someone fucked me awake. When I opened my eyes, it was over, all the need gone, by which I knew my life, and for one instant I believed I was entering the dark, the stable dark of the earth, and thought it would hold me. Yeah, so I've got for that, I think she's woken up, and for one instant she believes that she was in the dark, in the stable dark of the earth. Oh, stable dark of the earth. That's the wooden bars, isn't it? And for one instant, I believed I was entering the stable dark of the earth and thought it would hold me. So I think that she's believes that she woke up and she was at one with her sister, her other sister. She was sort of like they were connected um, from the living world, which wants its prey, um, to the buried one where she is waiting, but in the buried one where you're waiting. But I prefer that last one, that last line, that in changing stable to sable. And for one instant, I believed I was entering the sable dark of the earth and thought it would hold me, because that's sort of more. It's sort of it can be sable fur, but it can also be soft and velvety, and I think that would have been better than the stable. Um, but she's gone with stable, and that goes to the yeah, that goes. I think that could be something to do with the wooden bars as well, Andrew.
Yeah, and I think we go with literally the dream of morning, so we know that this is some type of death occurring, or
Yeah,
if not literal death, then death of something, personality, relationship. I sleep so you will be alive. It is that simple. The dreams themselves are nothing. They are the sickness you control, nothing more. And then we give a stanza break, and it almost like we get the dream.
mm,
And then the stanza comes where we kind of wake, right? And then morning comes demanding prey. And then last night was different. Someone fucked me awake. When I opened my eyes, it was over, by which I knew my life.
yeah. And I think if we go back to descending figure, that section three for my sister. My sister is moving in her crib, and I was a bit puzzled as to I can understand the crib, the wooden
Right.
bars. I think it could have been this reference to the stable dark of the earth.
Yeah.
Because however long they lie in the earth, they will not learn to speak, but remain uncertainly pressing against the wooden bars, so small the leaves hold them down. So
Or at least that unmoving characteristic of the ground
yeah,
or the earth or something. Yeah.
but she's also thinking about stables as well. Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And then a couple of poems on, we've got The World Breaking Apart,
Oh,
which I've
yes.
got as End of Marriage poem.
Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The World Breaking Apart. It's quite a title for a poem, isn't it?
Yeah.
A man reaching for his wife's hand across a slatted table and quietly covering it as though his will enclosed it in that gesture. I saw them come apart, the glazed clay begin dividing endlessly, dispersing incoherent particles that went on shining forever. I dreamed of watching that the way we watched the stars on summer evenings, my hand on your chest, and pain the free hand changes almost nothing. So they're watching the stars on summer evenings, and she's thinking back to a man reaching for his wife's hand across a slatted table and quietly covering it as though his will enclosed it in that gesture. And she's thinking, it's repeating itself, it's repeating itself, it's repeating itself.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. There is no such light and pain. The free hand is always there. It's not holding on to anything, it's just there. Changes almost nothing. Like the winter wind that leaves settled forms in the snow. Yeah. So it's quite abstract, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's still contemplative, isn't it? And it's
It
still
goes, I mean, it goes with the rest of the book here, I think, too, with this kind of
mm,
a little vague, but also there's these images that like the lyric side of it that's doing a lot of the work for it, uh world breaking apart. And again, we have this snow, we have leaves, we have, you know, another kind of unnamed couple, a wife's hand, a man and a wife,
yeah.
these kind of just vague little characters. Yeah,
And so at the end is Lamentations. So this is the fourth very important poem in this collection.
yeah, ends the entire book. And again, each section has had this little kind of very well structured poem like this with the
Yeah.
Lamentations. One,
Yes.
two, three,
Yeah.
four, four sections, and I think they've all been four sections too. Obviously by design, and this is the one that ends the whole thing. So the Logos, Nocturne, the Covenant, and the Clearing. The Clearing.
So, yeah. So God is appearing as a character, and this is all very Wild Iris territory, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All these little forms, seeds, beings,
And
entities, I suppose you could call them.
And the mourning, the lamentations, right? They were both still, the woman mournful, the man branching into her body. But God was watching. They felt his gold eye, projecting flowers on the landscape. Who knew what he wanted? He was God and a monster. So they waited, and the world filled with his radiance, as though he wanted to be understood. Far away, in the void that he had shaped, he turned to his angels.
Yeah. Keep going.
2. Nocturne. A forest rose from the earth. Oh, pitiful, so needing, God's furious love. Together they were beasts. They lay in the fixed dusk of his negligence. From the hills, wolves came, mechanically, drawn to their human warmth, their panic. Then the angels saw how he divided them, the man, the woman, and the woman's body. Above the churned reeds, the leaves let go, a slow moan of silver. 3. The covenant. Out of fear, they built a dwelling place, but a child grew between them as they slept, as they tried to feed themselves. They set it in a pile of leaves, the small discarded body wrapped in the clean skin of an animal. Against the black sky, they saw the massive argument of light. Sometimes it woke as it reached its hands. They understood they were the mother and father. There was no authority above them. 4. The clearing. Gradually, over many years, the fur disappeared from their bodies until they stood in the bright light, strange to one another. Nothing was as before. Their hands trembled, seeking the familiar. Nor could they keep their eyes from the white flesh, on which wounds would show clearly, like words on a page. And from the meaningless browns and greens, at last God arose, his great shadow, darkening the sleeping bodies of his children, and leapt into heaven. How beautiful it must have been, the earth, that first time, seen from the air.
Great. So I came back and back to this poem when I was trying to understand Glick.
Oh yeah.
And I think this is the poem you need that unravels a lot of her, unlocks a lot of her sort of thinking, her secrets. You know, this is where you need to go because there's an awful lot explained about her psychology in this, and she did go through a lot of therapy, didn't she? There's a lot of explained about her psychology, and it's a brilliant ending to the collection because it brings us back to this child, you know, these unprotected children. You know, what are they doing there? You know, so for the clearing, gradually over many years, the furs disappeared from their bodies. Well, they're so vulnerable, aren't they? And that's like the mirror, you know, where the flesh has been scraped off. So they've
And
got their souls.
isn't that a Greek mythology story as well? The fur falling from the bodies, like is that
I don't know, Andrew. I'm not that up in Greek
me
mythology.
neither is why I don't know it. Yeah, listeners, write it
I
in if you
don't
know. Put it
know.
in the comments, please. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I want to say, and I don't think it's Romulus and Remus, you know, like the raised by wolves thing, but I think. Maybe I'm just pulling it out of my ass, but I've a vague memory of my studies in my studies of there is a story of like yeah like born with fur that falls off or feathers that fall eventually. I mean, usually there's all these weird origin stories for the gods where they have sex with animals or something and they're born in you know like a new type of thing that's like a strange human animal hybrid or something that uh I don't know. You know, I was just
Do you want
thinking
me
of
to
that.
ask? Do you want me to ask AI?
We can see what they say, maybe.
Is there a Greek myth? Is there a Greek myth? Greek myth. The Greek myth involving fur falling off. Fur falling off. Question mark. Yes. Oh my God. Oh no. Ugh. A Greek myth involves fur falling off in the sense of Athena flaying the skin of her defeated giant opponent Pallas.
Hmm.
While not fur in the traditional sense, this is the closest Greek myth involving the removal and use of another's skin. Oh God. And the Golden Fleece, that's a bit better. It doesn't involve fur falling off as a result of battle. No, don't think that works. And Icarus and Daedalus. So maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe not. No. I think it's just a reference to the children being
Right.
defenseless. They've been, God is behind this. And the two descriptions of God, I think, are pretty fantastic, actually. God's golden eye. I mean, that is pretty fantastic, isn't it? But God was watching. They felt his golden eye projecting flowers onto the landscape. Who knew what he wanted? He was God and a monster. So it's kind of Adam and Eve poem.
Yeah.
They're in the garden. They're, you know, they're having sex, but they don't know why. They don't know why they're having sex. They don't really understand anything of what's going on, but they do know that someone's watching them, and that someone has got a golden eye and is incredibly mysterious and
Yeah.
the source of a lot of what's going on. And then, as they're lying in this state, a forest starts growing up from the earth, flowers leaping into radiance. Suddenly, there are lots of angels. Beasts are appearing. Wolves are appearing. Then suddenly, he divided them: the man, the woman, and the woman's body. And there's a kind of baby immediately, sort of a child immediately appears between them after they built a dwelling place. Um, they try to feed themselves, but they're Adam and Eve, and they don't really know how to. They set the child on a pile of leaves. Now this is where it all starts going wrong. So they set it on a pile of leaves because they don't know what to do, and God's not telling them what to do. So the implication is that this divine being is suddenly being incredibly negligent, and by not really explaining to them what they're supposed to be doing with this young child. It's one thing to have been created and then having sex, but it's quite another thing when a child arrives, because then they're responsible for that living being, and God is clearly not being responsible for that living being. He's asking this man and this woman to be responsible for this living being.
Hmm.
And sometimes the child won't. As it reached its hands, they understood they were the mother and the father. There was no authority above them. And then, so time goes on, things aren't great. Gradually, over many years, the fur disappeared from their bodies. Nothing was as before. Their hands trembled, seeking the familiar. Is that the parents, or is that the child? Is that bit?
I'm wondering if it's even like a reference to the Adam and Eve being banished from the garden.
Nor could they keep their eyes from the white flesh on which wounds would show clearly like words on a page. Then God comes back again. She's great on God. And, well, she's great on God in this poem. I don't know about Wild Hours so much. And from the meaningless browns and greens, I think that's a great line. From
Yeah.
the meaningless browns and greens, because, you know, the radiant flowers that were popping up, you know, it was all good. But gradually, because time interfered and they built their dwelling place and they got more and more confused about their purpose and what they were doing with this child on a pile of leaves, everything sort of suddenly changed. This landscape turned from a sort of beautiful place to meaningless browns and greens,
Yeah.
which is a great comment upon it's a great psychologically driven comment, that, isn't it? That, when your spirit's lower and, you fall into various states of apathy, you know, you stop, you stop thinking about the world as full of radiance and wonder, and you start thinking it's all a bit meaningless. They're just sort of trees and fields and more trees and more fields, and you know. And at last God arose. Finally, he's back. His great shadow darkening the sleeping bodies of his children. God, you're back. Finally, okay, what do we do now? And Glick says, darkening the sleeping bodies of his children, God leaps into heaven. So he's just not there. He's gone. How beautiful it must have been, the earth, that first time seen from the air. So it's like all they can imagine now is how they must look or have looked to God.
Right.
But the question is lingering, have they displeased God in some way? And is that why this is now happening to them?
So I kept wanting to say the Garden of Eden story, yeah, with the kind of once they are punished, right, they don't realize that they're naked, then they realize that they're naked after everything is different. They can't stop looking, the kind of sin, the original sin, right? The kind of looking at their
Yeah,
bodies now from the white flesh. And then, yeah, at meaningless browns and greens before they weren't meaningless. And at last God arose
yeah.
and leapt into heaven, leaving them there, right? Because they were now banished from that. But man, that last stanza, really that last sentence, yeah. How beautiful it must have been, the earth, that first time seen from the air. Almost
Mm,
like it ends on like a completely different thing, right? Like it almost ends on God's vision of like seeing the entire earth from the air for the first time instead of like the things that we just read all 4 seconds, like it kind of
yeah.
shifts drastically, but it still works, which is the brilliance of Glick. But yeah, I don't
So
know.
basically we're kind of like left. Adam and Eve, man and the woman, the child. We're just left
Right.
without any sense of real direction, don't quite know what's happening. It's for us to solve the problem of our existence.
Yeah.
And God, with his golden eye, is um, doing other things. And I looked at I thought, okay, descending figure. I thought, are there any ascending figures in Glick?
Right.
So I started to look through, and there are ascending figures. Not many, but there are. And this one comes in the Seven Ages, and it's a poem called The Balcony. And that's what, like, several books on, isn't it? It's like one, two, three, four. I don't know. It's got to be after the Wild Iris, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So this is how it goes. I've marked this as a very important poem. It's called The Balcony. It was a night. Sorry, Andrew. It's on page 443. Yeah, have you
Yeah.
got that?
Yeah.
Okay. It was a night like this at the end of summer. We had retired. No, we had rented, I remember, a room with a balcony. How many days and nights? 5, perhaps? No more. Even when we weren't touching, we were making love. We stood on our little balcony in the summer night, and off somewhere the sounds of human life. We were the soon-to-be anointed monarchs, well disposed to our subjects. Just beneath us, sounds of a radio playing, an aria we didn't in those days know. Someone dying of love, someone from whom time had taken the only happiness, who was alone now, impoverished without beauty. The rapturous notes of an unendurable grief, of isolation and terror, the nearly impossible to sustain slow phases of the ascending figures. They drifted out over the dark water like an ecstasy. such a small mistake. And many years later, the only thing left of that night, of the hours in that room.
Oh yeah.
Now, I think that's a terrific poem.
Yeah.
Um, it moves from a kind of ecstasy, really, of love, beautiful description of these two people who have gone away together. They've rented a room with a balcony, and they're experiencing just as the way that these couple were experiencing life in Lamentations. They were both still, the woman, the man branching into her body, but in a happier kind of like they've learned, you know. It's not like, that was Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
but this is today. This is like when was this section published? Was like, is it 1980?
Descending
Uh,
Figure was 1980.
yeah. So this is 1980. So this is Adam and Eve in 1980. They've learned a few things. They've learned that love can be ecstatic. They've learned that love can be enjoyable. They've learned that love can be unforgettable and memorable, and that it can combine in an experience like um, uh, sort of being on a balcony, the only someone from whom time, yeah, who, yeah, sort of merged into nature, just having that wonderful sort of experience of everything, just feeling just perfect.
Absolutely.
And then you've got the rapturous notes of the unendurable grief of isolation, terror, the nearly impossible. So they're hearing this from afar. So it's not like God's dumped them in the middle of all of this on it, and they've got to build their own dwelling. It's better than that. It's got better than that. But they can hear the sounds around of the slow phases of the ascending figures. They drifted out over the dark water like an ecstasy, such a small mistake. That is like, so the small mistake is that they were born. I think
Very Glick, yeah.
very Glick. So in the midst of this lovely, right at the end of this lovely portrait of rapturous love and sex, as they hear these sounds, such a small mistake. And many years later, the only thing left of that night of the hours in that room. So
Fantastic.
there we are.
That's why I said we're at the end of the another 3 hours on
Is
Louise
it?
Glück.
Has it been?
Roughly, give or take, we're at three. I figured that's where we'd hit. That's usually what
I
we've
was
been
hoping,
doing, Damon. We've been doing about three and a half per episode. So I think we're
but
up to double digits
I
in
was hoping
hours.
it wouldn't. I was hoping it wouldn't be that long, actually.
Oh no, it's totally worth it. This is the only place, again, listeners, you hear that this is the only place you're going to get over, 10, 11 hours of Louise Glick's first three books conversation
Mhm.
about it. Um, so all right, yeah. Final thoughts, Damon. Final thoughts. Any final thoughts on Glick or this book or before we sign off here?
I think yeah, Glick. I mean, I always think when I'm reading Glick, I do think of her as a person somehow. She's always present as a figure.
A descending figure,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
An
and
ascending figure, Glick, yeah.
she really personifies herself in these, in her work, doesn't she? And she really comes to maturity in this collection. I can almost feel her sort of pride in a lot of these poems.
Yeah.
She's really she's really done herself justice, and you can feel that, can't you?
What was that
But
line? What was that line from A House on Marshland in my great middle period?
the great poems of my middle period, yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. We're
Yeah,
getting into that middle period here. Yeah, like it's
yeah. But she's also she's still got this set of themes, this where she likes to torture herself by asking questions that you can't find the answers to.
right.
And I think that casts a darkness over her mission, really. She's setting herself a hard mission, I think. and I think it's going to be, and the hardness and the difficulty of that is going to ultimately lay out the map for the rest of her career,
Yeah.
and will turn into much more a darker metaphysics. I think what I call her dark metaphysics.
It's almost impossible to read the the next collection without having these previous three in our minds, like it's very, very, I mean, that would take, a concerted effort to not do that, right? You're supposed to do that. So I'm looking forward to that too, as we move deeper and deeper into Glick with these
I
collections,
think,
her
yeah, I mean,
errors, like, yeah.
the next collection, The Triumph of Achilles, is one of my least favorites of her collection. Just to give you a little bit of a
I've never read
heads
it.
up.
I've never read it in its entirety. So that should be good. Then we'll,
Yeah. And yet it follows this, rather brilliant, whether you love the poems or not,
right.
rather brilliant piece of the poetic art.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my final thoughts. What are your final
I
thoughts?
mean, more of the same. Yeah, everybody should read Glick. You should buy this book. It's linked below, listeners. Buy it through the link too, so you can support this podcast. And you should read along with us here, especially as we get through here. Again, put your comments in the comment sections. That's what they're there for. Something we had somebody actually comment on our last episode. No, our first Glick episode on YouTube. This is why I said comment wherever you're getting it, listeners. I know you can do this on Spotify now. I'll see it, wherever it is. It's not like I get a bunch of them where I'm not seeing them. I get, a couple. Most of them are
Yeah,
negative. But
yeah,
every once in a while somebody will chime in with something interesting, and somebody, a listener, chimed in and said when we were speculating about who her teacher was in firstborn,
yeah.
that dedication, there were a few interesting speculative answers from a couple listeners that I thought were very interesting, and
Mm,
yeah, so listeners, go check those out if if you're into that or whatever. If this is an ongoing thing, and Damon will be back, listeners, he will be back here when we do the next one, and he'll be back after that. We will continue doing the Louise Glick poems,
okay,
1962 to 2012. And
okay,
yeah,
okay. All right,
Damon,
Andrew.
looking
Well,
forward to the next one. Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, The Triumph of Achilles.
And who knows? You never know what we're going to get out of it. We might get something out of it. We might get some
Well,
new
we might
appreciation. We might,
you never know.
yeah, yeah. But as always, I appreciate you taking the time,
Yeah,
Damon. I know this is quite an ask. So
it's
really
okay.
appreciate it.
It's
Always a
okay.
good time.
I mean, I wouldn't have gone back. I was saying to Kate earlier, I wouldn't have gone back to reread, A Refusal to Mourn the Death by Fire of a Child in London. And I think talking about that poem in the context um, of Glick, it's just something I wouldn't normally have done,
Right.
I think. And those things, those experiences keep on popping up. Yeats sort of popped
Yeah.
up last time, didn't he? And it's always fun going back to Oppen. This Oppen's got so much to say about all of this. And so much not to say actually as well.
Yeah.
Draws,
Yeah.
draws
Yeah.
lines. So I'm learning a lot doing it. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's always the fun of
Mm.
it too. The
Learning
important
a lot
thing
about
is,
learning a lot about poetry, I think, and the poetry, the craft of poetry.
oh yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
her approach to each of those poems is so considered, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm finding that very instructive.
You say, I mean, no
Yeah.
wonder it takes her 5, 6, 7 years for each book here, where she's
Mm,
just considering so much. Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
as always, Damon, it was a pleasure. We're looking forward to the next one here, and you will be hearing more from Damon Moore, listeners. So,
Okay, Andrew. All right. Bye for now.
Heavy.
bored,
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
bored,
I may say the male is entirely hostile. No!
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I
Heavy.
should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Bored. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Bored is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.